Okay, I'd like to call the East Bay Community Energy Board of Directors meeting to order for January 17th.
Yes, we're in session. Pardon me, we're in session.
I hope so. I called it to order. Can you call the roll?
Sure. Albany. Here. Berkeley. Dublin.
Here.
Emeryville. Here. Fremont. Hayward.
Here.
Livermore. Oakland. Piedmont.
Present.
San Leandro.
Present.
Union City. Here. Community Advisory Committee. Here. Alameda County.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Please join Minda and Dell on the pledge.
Join us in the flag. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all.
Public comment, a time in which you can speak to anything that's not on today's agenda. I have no speaker cards, although I'm being handed one. Jessica Tovar.
Hi, I just wanted to make a comment on process with the agenda. So there was some confusion because we saw a very large packet, and it was concerning because it seemed as if they were all going to be items up for vote. So I just wanted to suggest maybe clearly stating on the agenda like what's up for vote, what's up for discussion, or if things are up for discussion, that they're provided separately and not in the agenda, so it was a little confusing. I don't know if that's clear, but so we appreciate all the work of the staff, and we appreciate that, you know, some of these items were posted early and they won't be voted on until a couple of weeks because that gives us plenty of time. But it initially looked like we only had a few days, so just to be clear about that. And I did want to speak on another issue, but I think it's on the agenda, so I'll wait until then.
Okay.
Thank you.
So with that, I actually wanted to recommend or welcome Mayor Ducci-Vinacci. I had mentioned to her about Union City's spotty attendance, and she immediately said that she would start coming and put herself on the board. And I really want to thank her for being here and attending the meeting, and she's now the appointee from Union City. So thank you very much for being here, and welcome. Okay, did you want to say something?
Looking forward to learning a lot. I got a steep learning curve here.
Okay. So with that, we will now go to closed session for the purpose of...
Pardon me, Chair. I have one more public comment. Do you want to take it now?
I called on the...
Okay.
Oh, go ahead.
No. Okay. Pardon me. He's going to speak on an item, so you're safe.
Oh, okay. For the purpose of appointment of general counsel, okay, I'm not quite sure that this is worded properly on the 18th.
No, it should be for the purposes of discussing candidates for general counsel for appointment at a public
Yeah, but I think
meeting.
there's supposed to be some whole government code thing you're supposed to put there in the future. I don't know. I could be wrong. What do I know? So, but regardless, we're going into closed session. See ya. Where do we go? All right, we're returning back from closed session. I would ask counsel, is there anything to report out of closed session?
The board gave direction to staff in closed session.
Okay, thank you. All right, looking for a motion on consent. Mendel?
So, I'm going to actually suggest that we take a couple of the regular items and move them on to consent. And so,
I'm fine with that.
with the chair's permission, I would like to move items 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, and 12.
All right.
Chair, I have one speaker for item 12.
What?
I have a speaker for item 12.
Then I will modify my motion.
You don't have it up here.
Then we should...
Hold on. Don't get so anxious. Let me see what the speaker looks like. We'll hear what Barbara has to say, and then if we need to, we'll pull it.
That's fine.
Is that okay?
That's fine. And if there's a seconder, I do have one minor change.
Okay, well, what's your change?
Minutes. It's just to correct the spelling of my name. And I've already spoken with
All right,
Stephanie
somebody
about it.
spelled...
Against that.
Yeah. Hold on, Anna Olivia. I'm sorry, Director Aldred. Can I get a second on the motion?
I'll second.
Okay, so hold on a second. Director Aldred?
Can you repeat which items you're moving on to consent?
The consent item is items 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, and 12. And I have a speaker on 12, and we may pull it out, but we're going to hear what the speaker has to say. Barbara Stepp, did you want to...
The Community Advisory Committee has comment that we would like to make on 8, changes we would like to make on 9, and some clarification that we need legally for 10. And lots of things to say on 12.
Okay, do you want to go now, or do you want Barbara to speak?
As is your wish. I don't have a preference on that.
You have the floor if you'd like to go now.
You mean on those specific items?
Yeah.
Sure. So on item 8, while ultimately we ended up voting to support the approval of this, it was a 3-3 split. I broke that split, but the primary issue is that in the past, RFPs have included a member of the CAC in the review process. We are not suggesting blocking this, but do want to point out that normally we can make an informed recommendation because we have participated in the process, and we have not participated in this one. So moving forward, as we develop the policy around RFP review and selection, the advisory committee would like to continue our history of participation in these events. On the number 9, we just wanted to clarify one sentence and add the words "for approval" in section 3F, which speaks specifically to the CEO coming back to the board, and instead of just reporting on it, seeking approval on, I think it was budgets and salaries. Number 10, there is not, in fact, clarification if the if CAC committee members are designated, are a designated position, that would require Form 700 to be filled out. You all received communications around that earlier today, so if we are required to fill that out and can be either have to recuse ourselves or step down from our committee because of that conflict of interest, then we should be named in that document. And then I do hope you pull number 12, because that should be some discussion.
Anna Olivia, this last one you were just speaking about, where are you on that one, on 12?
On 12, there are 2 of the 3 items there are meant to be voted on, and one is to discuss and not a vote this evening. On 12A, we recommended approval of item A with the following changes. On the customer confidentiality policy, we were seeking clarification on whether or not this policy replaces the policy in the previous item, because the 2 are identical, except for a date which our CEO said they would clarify. And we wanted to change two little words in the JPA section that said should submit addition or amendment to CEO, COO, or board clerk, as opposed should contact. Like, it should be just formalizing what that process is. And then that was a unanimous, most of these were, except for the ones that I'm clarifying are not. And then on C, we recommended to attach to 12C, number 4, that the CEO can, this is the one where looking to act on legislative matters, add that the CEO should confer with the chair of the board and the chair of the advisory committee or vice chair if the chairs are not available, just to check in, or the executive council.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to Barbara Stebbins.
So I think item 12, approval of administrative and operational policies. It seems pretty clear why you'd want to move that to the consent calendar, because it seems like kind of the internal operating procedures for the staff. But we just want to caution that sometimes what will happen in publicly run, governed programs is that the staff will wind up actually running the program in a way that really they aren't designed to do, just because there isn't time for the boards of directors to look over all the details of the operating policies. That's where the details of the program kind of get written. And I think in particular, East Bay Clean Power Alliance has some comments around the administrative procurement practices. We're really happy to see the proposal to have certain community benefit point adders in RFP processes, so that there's a suggestion of a 5% bonus points for located in Alameda, projects located in Alameda, 2.5 bonus for businesses that are women, minority-owned, disabled vet, and a number of other categories. And then also a 2.5 bonus for those that used union labor. But I guess, is 2.5% enough? Is that actually going to encourage projects to hire union labor? So it's in those details sometimes. It's very important to make sure that you all have oversight, to make sure that policy isn't inadvertently getting written in the details. And just a couple others, the delinquent accounts. We understand that there needs to be a process for people who don't pay their bills, but we would really love to see East Bay Community Energy have a different relationship with people who cannot pay their bills, one that is actually user-friendly, that maybe helps people work out payment plans, that refers them early in the process to programs that will help them pay their bills. And then lastly, the process for the JPA, I think the Community Advisory Committee made that recommendation. We're a little concerned that it not become open season on the JPA. So those are the comments from East Bay Clean Power Line.
Thank you, Barbara. Okay, so I'll go to Nick. What do you have to say about all this?
Well, I would just say on the two items that Barbara referred to, the administrative procurement policies and the delinquent accounts and collections, those were discussion policies, so we're not seeking board approval today on either of those policies. Those are certainly policies we understand to be of great interest to this board and to the community, and so this was really an opportunity to get what we think as sort of good starting points out there, and then take feedback with the goal that at our February 7th meeting is then where we're actually going to bring forward a recommendation. I think on the other items, on item 8 and item 9, on item 9, which is the CEO, the personnel officer, I think that for approval, the intention is in a presentation of a budget matter, certainly the expectation is that the board would approve a budget. I don't think so. Maybe that's the intention is already there. So I think for the purposes of the consent, I think we can leave it on the consent because that's certainly the intention. I expect that this board would want to have a say in a budget matter. On item 11 that was referred to, we are going to be pulling item 11 from the agenda, so that addresses one of the questions that Chair Eldred referred to as it relates to the customer confidentiality policy. So that's really all I have to say at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Al?
Just one regarding item 10, the addition of the CAC members to the list that are required for Form 700.
Yes, I can speak to that item. The board actually adopted a separate conflict of interest policy for the CAC members in March that is separate from this one, which calls out the board members and employees of the EBCE. Because the CAC is an advisory group, they enjoy somewhat more favorable conflicts rules, and so we wanted to make sure that those were reflected. So they have a separate policy, which I actually passed out at the recent meeting when I gave the CAC a conflicts training, but I'll be happy to send it out again.
Thank you.
Okay, I got Vice Chair Cobb, and then I've got Director Pilch.
To the last point, the CAC members still have to file a 700, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
CAC members should file a Form 700 that shows any energy industry-related financial connections. And I went over that at the training that I gave, and I'm also happy to talk to individual CAC members if they have questions about how to fill out the Form 700.
Okay, thank you. And regarding item 8, the approval of our contract legislative advocate, and is there a timing for when they would start? Are they here today?
Yes, they are.
I know someone wanted to put this on a consent, but I'd be interested in having a brief introduction by our.
We're going to get there.
We are.
I'm going to do that.
Okay.
By the legislative people?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to get that.
Okay. All right. And then
just trying to get some of this other stuff out of the way first, and I'm going to have them come up.
Okay. And finally, on that same item, we haven't hired a lot of staff yet. You hired some staff, so. Will you be hiring a legislative or policy kind of person other than yourself to manage or be the point of contact with?
So we have hired a director of regulatory affairs who's been most focused on CPUC, but she is engaging with Mark and the Weideman Group because of the clear interplays between what's happening at the CPUC and in the legislature.
Thank you.
Okay, Director Pilch?
Yeah, so just I need some clarification on what we're doing here. We're adding 8, 9, and 10, and 12 to the consent calendar.
That's
Is that correct? That's the motion? Okay. And I thought I heard the CEO say that a couple of those items actually we weren't voting to approve, but they were discussion items, or was that another item?
So on item 12, there is a discussion item. I think if we were to move, correct me if I'm wrong, if this is moved to the consent calendar, there could still be an opportunity to discuss the administrative and delinquent policies at some point on the agenda.
I think we could move the administrative. It's the procurement or the delinquent?
The procurement and the delinquent.
Okay, we could move those off of consent and discuss those separately.
So you need to deal with 12 separately, so you want it out of consent. Okay, so 12's out of consent.
That's fine.
Okay, so motion amended to just include 8, 9, and 10. So for 9, I had a question about the intent behind this, the intent behind naming you as the personnel officer. I started thinking about things like typically an organization will bring in maybe a part-time HR person to deal with things like the employee handbook and all that sort of thing. And then I also started to think about you being able to, the CEO being able to appoint all the employees, but then the organization growing past, a certain number of employees, typically you would have a little bit of management thrown in there at some point. So I'm wondering, can you speak maybe to those 2 points?
Absolutely. So, right now we have 8 people on staff. We have 2 more people that we're seeking to hire. And so, we haven't hired an HR person, part-time or full-time yet, but we need policies. We need to set our HR handbook. And so this is really an effort to say, we need to start setting these policies. I'm the natural personnel officer to do that. And as we build the organization, and I think there will be changes and additions that we're making to reflect, the fact that there are layers of management, and there are going to be, decisions that can be made by line managers as opposed to executive managers.
Okay, just I guess a note on that is that what I've seen happen in smaller organizations before is that just to relieve you of the burden of a lot of paperwork, there are HR people for hire that you can retain to just come in and deal with that sort of thing. Just concerned that the CEO dealing with a lot of paperwork around hiring.
Just to briefly speak to that issue, the resolution and the staff report both note that the CEO might delegate some of those functions to either consultants or to like HR staff.
Perfect.
But ultimately, he would be the person who would be responsible for all personnel decisions for the employees below him in the hierarchy.
Okay, great. All right, thank you. And then just one more, item 10. Actually, 2 more questions. First, item 10, we need to, the conflict of interest code apparently names certain positions directly, so that's why we had to add certain other positions in. Is that the intent there?
Correct. As we add new positions to the agency, we're required to go back and update our conflict of interest code to reflect all of the sort of management executive level positions. Okay. And each of them should have reporting requirements. So we may be coming back to you periodically, maybe every 6 months to a year, to continue to update that list. Okay. In the in-between period, there is a provision in the conflict code as adopted by the board that requires new executive management level employees to file a Form 700 and to follow sort of the same rules that the CEO follows. So okay. It's mostly a technical update.
Sure. Okay, makes sense. And then the last question is the intent of the mover of the motion to accept the CAC recommendations with the motion or no?
It was not. I think the recommendations are sort of covered, certainly for item 10, item 8 is just clarification. Item 9 is included in the language already, and so I don't know that there's any change that's required.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay. Director Eldridge.
Many of our clarifications were addressed with, but 12 is pulled. Yep, that's fine.
Okay. Could I have the representative from Richards, Watson, and Gershon come down and explain yourself?
Oh, I think you may be speaking of Weideman. I'm the representative from Richards, Watson, and Gershon.
Wait a minute.
I'm sorry.
Weideman, sorry.
Yeah, I already have the Weiderman group or whatever. I already have that one over there.
How are you? Mark Weideman on behalf of the Weideman Group.
Sorry for mispronouncing.
No problem. Happens all the time.
Mark.
Yeah. Would you guys just like me to talk a little bit about my background and our firm's background? Does that make sense?
Yeah, just a brief synopsis of
Okay, I'll be very brief. First of all, it's an honor to be here, and it's an honor to be considered for your approval to be your lobbyist in Sacramento. My name's Mark Weideman. I'm a lawyer by training, and I'm the principal of Weideman Group. My background is that I was previously a PUC lawyer, so I did regulatory law before the Public Utilities Commission on behalf of entities like AT&T, the phone company, and some other clients. And ultimately, I transitioned out of law into lobbying and oversaw government affairs for a number of large organizations. The phone company was one of them, so oversaw their regulatory and legislative affairs in California. And I did that for another large company, Blue Shield of California Health Plan, before starting a lobbying firm. And we started the firm about 6.5 years ago, and we have found ourselves a wonderful niche in the clean energy space. We have about 5 lobbyists that are registered and 2 support staff, so we're pretty robust with regards to our ability to have a lot of boots on the ground representing EBCE in the Capitol on any issues. And our focus in our practice area has been around sort of advancing clean energy, community-based energy, so it fits nicely into who we are as a firm to represent you. It's something that we would take great pride in being able to do. Give you an idea of some of the work we've done in the past. We've done work for solar, we've done work for biomass, we've done work for electric vehicle manufacturers, we've done work for clean fuel cell technologies, things like that. And our hope is that we can put EBCE on the map in Sacramento. I think CCAs right now are relatively unknown quantities. Your typical legislator, unless they sit on an energy committee, doesn't really even know what a CCA is. And they certainly don't know what EBCE is because it's a new organization. And I think from our perspective, we want to put EBCE on the map. We want to make sure that people understand what CCAs are and the value proposition they're providing for communities, and make sure that we are really well positioned as an organization to prevent anything negative happening to us, to our customers, and the goals we want to achieve. And doing that through really strong relationships with our district representatives, the people that represent the areas that you all represent, and then also the key leaders in the energy space and other spaces that are relevant to us. Making sure the chairs of those committees and key leaders in Sacramento know who we are and feel strongly about us and that protect our interests. And then ultimately, we think within a year or so, we ought to be in a position, once we're established, to start thinking about proactive legislation, what we can be doing to advancing, to advance CCAs statewide and locally here on behalf of EBCE. I'll stop there and open up for any questions.
Questions? You got lucky. Oh, Jesse, go ahead.
So there is a pending issue before the CPUC, which may affect the ability for the creation of CCAs, and I know that we all collectively will be, weighing in on behalf of our different jurisdictions to urge reconsideration of that resolution. Where do you see that going, and what would be your strategy when you come on to advance the interests of EBC in that process?
It's interesting. There's always a push and a pull between the legislature and the regulator, between the PUC and the California State Legislature. And I think there may be an opportunity to use some levers in the legislature to try to impact the outcome that happens before the PUC. Ultimately, a lot of this goes up to the governor's office because those PUC commissioners, were appointed by the governor, and I think that's the epicenter for a lot of that activity. But if they hear from legislators that represent our area, legislators that represent areas of other CCAs, and they hear the concerns of our members, I think that they will be responsive to those concerns. No guarantees, but I think from a tactical perspective, hearing from representatives who value CCAs, who have CCAs in their districts, and hearing that from a legislative level and having the legislature weigh in with the PUC and also through the governor's office could be a way to combat what we're seeing.
If I may.
Go ahead, Mayor.
So is there some sort of lobbying organizing effort that's underway? I know that there are a lot of sort of environmental advocacy organizations that have been raising awareness of this issue and have been trying to get local leaders to weigh in on it, but is there already an effort underway? And when would your contract start, Nick?
So the contract, because the legislative session has started already, we entered into a short-term contract for 1 month, or the balance of a month.
Okay.
To allow us to start working January, hit the ground running on January 1st. So that contract runs through, I think the effective date of today or the end of the month. I need to go back to the actual document. So, we have a structure for a contract, but the hope is we'll execute something very quickly, and then the contract will run through the end of the year.
Okay.
Yeah. And there is some activity already underway. The larger umbrella organization for all the CCAs has already begun some activity and outreach. So I do think that it's game on this issue, and it's far from decided yet. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate you coming down. All right, so with that, we have a motion in front of me that consists of items 4 with this additional correction of Mendel's name, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10. That's it. It was a motion and a second. Is there any objection to the motion? Motion passed without objection. Go to item 7, CEO report.
Great. All right, so the CEO report, I'm really going to focus here on a discussion of some workflow priorities. Just give a quick overview of some of the key work that's happening in the agency as we prepare ourselves to launch. So the first one is an update on data management activities. This is the work that SMUD is doing with PG&E. So in general, we're in the process of integrating with PG&E. So that's a fairly complex, lengthy process to integrate SMUD's system with PG&E to test the various transfer protocols and just go through the steps with PG&E. So we're in that process. We're in the process of finalizing our master service agreement and our task order. So that's the contract. In November, when this item was brought before the board, the delegation was given to me to finalize the contract within certain parameters. Those were a 2-year contract, a price not to exceed $1.05 per meter per month, and then sort of endeavor to move as quickly as possible, but at the end of the contract to bring our call center in-house. And those are the things that are all embedded in the contract. There's obviously a lot more detail in the contract around specific milestones and work products, intellectual property, and the like. Once that is finalized, I will present that to the board for review. But we're almost there on that. We have, while our customer relationship management system is being developed for the purposes of enrollment, we have developed a system. Actually, my colleague here, Taj, built the CRM for us, so a very cost-effective approach to the solution. And we are currently using that to manage a lot of our interactions with our commercial customers. Going forward, it's the PG&E data interchange and the data transactions, and really sort of making sure that that system works. It's getting all of our forms and our call center scripts and our customer relationship management system tested, up and running for that June launch. Really effectively, that means having these systems in place by April, when customer notices start going out, though. And we're also starting the process of getting refreshed usage data. All the data that we've had so far has been from 2016. That's the data we're using internally. That's the data that the local development business plan team has had to use. And so we're now able to in the coming week or so, get 2017 usage data. That will give us 2 years, give us a slightly more accurate view of what we should expect going into 2018. And then on the customer eligibility and phasing, we have made the decision here as a board to pursue multiple phases. We're phasing in commercial industrial customers and municipal customers first in June, and then residential at a later date to be determined by the board, and we will be bringing that back for discussion soon. But within that, there's some nuance. So when you phase in commercial industrial customers, you're effectively phasing all of those rates in, but there are a few subset of customers who have very complex rates. One key example is UC Berkeley has a large cogeneration plant on their campus, and as a result, they're on a very complicated rate. They're actually metered and billed differently than all the other customers in PG&E service territory. You want to be very careful about how you bring them into your service. So UC is an example. There are a number of these others, they're called standby customers, who we're going to wait to bring on until phase 2 at the end of the year, potentially into phase 3, so we make sure that their customer experience is good. The other major group here are net metered customers, so you don't want to bring your net metered customers on all at once, because as net metering you develop credits over the course of the year. When you bring them onto your service without being mindful of what their true update is, they can lose their credits. So the way that CCAs have been doing this is you bring them on over the course of a year as close to their true update as possible, so you preserve as many of those credits as possible. So that's the general approach to phasing that we're taking, is customer experience driven. And then when we think about residential customers, it's similarly NEM customers first. The other major class of customers that we're likely to we're evaluating whether we can phase them in at phase 2 are budget billing customers. So those are customers who have gone on a special bill where they're billed the same amount every month instead of having a summer and winter fluctuation. And so because of the way PG&E's billing system works, it's sometimes challenging for CCAs to support these customers. So again, there's additional work that needs to be done with SMUD as they configure their billing system to make sure that we can support that. We don't want to bring a customer on that's used to having the same bill every month, and suddenly there's a fluctuation. And so again, it's driven by customer experience. So those are the details on data management. I'm happy to take questions now or keep going and take questions at the end of the presentation.
Director Mandel.
Thank you. So the board had indicated a desire to allow residential users to be early adopters if they, took the initiative. Is that included in the June 1st launch, or are you?
Yep. So there will be an opportunity. There are some specific functionalities that you have to consider about what the process for electing is and what sort of the number of customers we can support. So we're sort of in the process of making sure.
Okay.
Yes, there will be the ability for early adoption.
Worked out. I just wanted to make sure it's still included. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Have we received information yet? Do we know who the large direct access customers are, and do we have plans maybe after phase 1 to kind of compete and go after them? I thought UC was a direct access. Did they not? So we also thought UC was direct access, but Berkeley is not. Berkeley, because of this cogen facility, they're the one campus that is not direct access. The rest of the campuses are. We do have a list of all the direct access customers. You know who they are. And we certainly have had some initial discussions about once we're up and running, and we have sort of a sense of a competitive product that we could bring them, of starting to target those customers. But during the initial phase in and the initial set of customer interactions, we're focusing on those customers who are going to come into our service.
Anybody else? Okay.
All right, so wholesale energy services is the next item. We are in the process of finalizing our contract with NCPA. That's proceeding in due course. That's going well. And there will be more details on wholesale energy services later on the agenda, so I'm going to skip any further discussion of that here. On the marketing front, at the end of the year, there was a website refresh. We've developed and are starting to circulate collateral for businesses. I will say one of the important things to sort of remember with sort of this first phase marketing effort is it's really focused on commercial customers and businesses and the outreach to businesses. And so as a result, there's some very specific sort of tactics and messages that we're developing and deploying. And as we think about our main launch to the vast majority of our customers, we are going to be undertaking a more extensive marketing effort, really thinking about brand a lot more when we think about mass market deployment. And I think that's a conversation that we're working on internally, and we are going to be then engaging with the board and the community over the coming weeks and months as we start to think about that rollout. We have sent an e-blast out to our top 200 accounts. Dan Lieberman, our senior manager of account services, who has just joined us, has been spending each and every day out there meeting with these customers, going to chambers of commerce meetings, and so that is a big part of our outreach strategy over the coming months, is really just meeting these businesses, understanding their energy needs, going into the community with the community groups that represent these businesses, meeting with economic development offices of your cities and the counties, talking to them about the priorities. Director Martinez has indicated an interest in acting as a liaison, and so we have been meeting with Director Martinez to get feedback on key marketing strategies and approaches. And we're very thankful for her time, and we look forward to continuing to work with her in that way. In terms of the key marketing outreach dates, our plan is on February 21st to bring examples of the first customer notices that we plan to send for board review. We're going to start our advertising campaign early March, and we're going to run it through June. That's going to be a campaign really, again, focused on businesses. Think about the kinds of print that businesses may receive and may read, digital, focused on businesses. We are, as I said, focused on account outreach, and we're talking to especially our large customers already. In February and then into March, we're also going to be bringing that brand roadmap and the Phase 2 roadmap. That's really thinking about our values, the brand, as we think about our mass market deployment. And so that is coming. That's something that we're working on. So next is moving on to, well, first, any questions there, or shall I move on to the regulatory?
Keep going.
Okay. So on the regulatory front, we are actively working on a number of key regulatory issues. The first and probably the single most important regulatory issue that we're engaged in is the update to the power charge and difference adjustment. The PCIA is the exit fee. It really is the item that drives the most uncertainty when we think about the energy that we're going to buy. It's this value that represents, think about our total, the total PG&E bill is around 10 cents. It's 3 cents, so it's 30%. And so we always have to think about our costs have to be, plus the PCI have to be below PG&E. So as that number fluctuates significantly, it can go up 10, 15, 20% in a given year. It really has a pretty significant impact on our ability to, one, continue to offer a discount, and two, make decisions around energy procurement. So the California Public Utilities Commission is in the process of rethinking the PCIA, and we're very much engaged in that process, mostly at this point focused on our engagement with CalCCA, which is our trade association. We've been working on an idea called the market allocation mechanism within the context of CalCCA that really is focused on giving CCAs control over the contracts that PG&E has signed. So PG&E has signed significant amounts of wind and solar in particular over the course of the last years. And instead of having them just give us those costs, we feel like we're much better suited if we have control over how those contracts and how those costs are allocated. And so, but again, this is an iterative process. We're working very closely with other CCAs on this point, and we'll continue to provide updates to the board as that proceeding continues. Draft resolution E4907, as Mayor Arreguín referred to, is the resolution that was issued at the end of 2017 by the CPUC that would delay the formation of new CCAs. It does not affect East Bay Community Energy. predominantly actually affects CCAs that are in the formation process in Southern California. We have been working to try to understand the underlying problem that the PUC is saying exists that relates to this, these requirements on how much capacity every CCA and the utilities have to buy to make sure that there's enough there on the grid for those really hot peak days. The approach that I feel that East Bay, is best suited to take and that will sort of be most effective at the CPUC is one very focused on sort of really sound analysis and really strong legal arguments that we make. And so we've been working with the trade association on their comments, and we put forward an alternative proposal to what the CPUC is suggesting that we believe fixes the problem that they've identified around who pays for this resource adequacy while allowing CCAs that are in the formation process to go about their business and form in 2018, while also thinking about a longer term solution going into 2019, so we make sure that there's not this disconnect anymore. On the integrated resource plan front, this is probably the third, most significant regulatory item that we're facing. Integrated resource planning is really the long-term resource. When we think about the long-term resources East Bay is going to be procuring, that will be our integrated resource plan. How much wind, how much solar, how much energy storage, how much local demand response and energy efficiency, and what is the optimal mix of all those different kinds of resources? How do they fit together over a 10-year horizon? So the CPUC has been working on developing a set of requirements that would apply to the IOUs and the CCAs. They put out a requirement that would assert more jurisdiction, PUC jurisdiction over CCAs than has been the case. We're engaged in that process, trying to think through again, what are their concerns? Let's solve those concerns, because when we solve their concerns, then we can make arguments against sort of their, what we think are sort of their overreach, their broader overreach. So that was my regulatory and really a regulatory update. Not a lot going on the legislative front just yet. Any questions there? Okay. On the banking and credit services front, we are deep in our negotiations with Barclays Bank over our line of credit. Our expectation is that we are going to bring back, we will bring a credit documents to the board for approval on February 7th. We are as we are finalizing the agreement, the next step is for us to meet with the county and walk through the covenants in the contract with the county, who are our current creditor, and make sure that they're comfortable with the credit covenants that Barclays will impose on us, and make sure that we're positioned to pay the county back expeditiously. River City Bank, who will be managing our lockbox for energy supply, we're in the final stages of finalizing documents with them, and that should be in place well in time to be able to start buying and selling energy. And then finally, any questions on that, on credit and banking services? Nope. So, and then on the local development business plan, the first round of deliverables, as I think folks here know, were issued for public comment in November. Comments were received by, I believe, eight entities, and then the CAC also provided comment. In December, the second round of deliverables were issued for public comment last week. Comment period will close on February 7th. And then in February, probably actually the second meeting in February, not February 7th, we will ask the local development business plan team to come in and give a more detailed sort of overview of where they are in the project. All right, there you go. That's it.
Questions? Jessica? Jessica?
Okay, so I wanted to make some comments on this resolution by the California Public Utilities Commission E4907. And so just to be very clear, East Bay Clean Power Alliance has been organizing around this because that resolution does threaten other community choice programs. It also sets a bad precedent of the CPUC has a long history of attacks on community choice. So it would affect new community choice programs by stalling their approvals of their implementation plans. It is an overreach of the CPUC authority. And just to add that the examples of the things that the CPUC has approved in favor of the utilities is the power charge indifferent adjustment, or the PCIA, or the exit fees that we all have to pay to the utilities for having community choice programs. So East Bay Clean Power Alliance is calling for the board of East Bay Community Energy to take a position to demand that this resolution be retracted. Again, this sets a poor precedent, a long history of attacks on community choice. It's very clear this is coming from the utilities, and that the CPUC is very much in bed with the utilities. So we are asking for your support in demanding that that resolution be pulled. You should have received an extensive letter from me earlier, beginning of this year. So that's it.
Thank you, Jessica. Okay, any questions on this? Any questions of the executive director? All right, moving right along, wherever that is. Okay, move to item 11, approve EBCE customer confidentiality policy.
So I would like to pull item 11. It is a duplicative of one of the items on item 12. So I ask that we pull item 11.
Huh?
I would like to pull item 11.
Oh, you don't want to deal with it today? Well,
The customer confidentiality policy is also included in item 12, so that was, item 11 is there in error.
okay. So now you want to do item 12?
Correct.
Thank you.
Good evening, Chair and members of the board. We're going to separate the policies between the items that we're asking you to discuss versus the items that we were recommending that you adopt tonight. Several of these are fairly technical in nature, including the records retention policy, which basically just establishes some minimum records retention periods for our documents, which helps us to reduce costs overall so that we don't have to retain all of our documents forever. And the customer confidentiality policy essentially sets us in line with other CCAs and with utilities in terms of how we handle customer information. And it is a requirement before we launch our program. So in drafting the policy, we looked at how other CCAs had handled this issue, and we looked at the PUC rules and essentially mirrored those. I'm happy to answer any questions on those two, which I think are the more technical items.
Questions? No questions.
Great.
Dan Kolb has a question.
Oh, please.
So, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, let me get back to that. Did you include C on that, or you were just talking about A and B first?
I was taking them somewhat out of order to talk about the more technical items first. So that was the records retention policy and the confidentiality policy.
Oh, no questions on those.
Okay. And then we also have a delegation of authority for regulatory and legislative matters for the CEO to act in situations in which we don't have time to call a special meeting of the board and when other circumstances make it necessary for us to act quickly. And I understood from Chair Eldridge that there were comments from the Community Advisory Committee on this one.
Those comments were only that that we support giving our CEO the authority to act quickly on things that come up, as they do quite quickly, but also encouraging him to reach out to either the executive committee or the chairs of the CAC and the board for check-in on those items.
Do we have any questions on that item, or did you want to respond?
Go ahead, Dan.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I concur with the CAC's recommendation on this particular, and I would, the expectation in my mind would be that if the CEO is acting in an urgent manner, that if they can, to check with one person on the board or as suggested, but also after you take action, to not necessarily wait 3 more weeks till we have our next board meeting to tell us you took action, but to inform us in a manner consistent with the Brown Act that some action was taken. And so at least those of us who, if we end up having committees of this board who are engaged in legislative committee actions, will know what's going on soon after they happened.
Okay. Well, I want to try to understand this because it says, and conference with board chair and chair of community advisory committee, which to me it's almost, first of all, I think it should be chair and vice chair. It should not be just the chair. But
Chair and
the way this is worded, it almost puts the community advisory in a position that they have to concur, and that's the way I read it. And I mean, it's simply the community advisory committee. I just want to be clear from my standpoint anyways, when we set them up, I don't think we ever said we were going to run everything we do past them before it comes to this board. And to me, it's now to the point where we're running the entire agenda past them before it comes to us. And I don't think we ever said we were going to do that. And I'm starting to see some heads shaking around the tables that actually agree with me. So I think I have no problem with the recommendation. Conference with chair and vice chair of board, I'm fine with that. And then if need be, he can advise the community advisory chair, that's fine. And it should say that as such, advise. But I just, I think at some point we need to have a discussion about this in public and quit dancing around it. Because first of all, we're really, I think we're running our executive director a little crazy. And I just don't think this is the way we ever set it up. And those are my thoughts. Al?
So I actually appreciate the chair's raising that point, because it touches on something I've been thinking, which is that we need to prioritize these matters that are coming before the CAC and the board. And at the beginning of the meeting, I moved a bunch of things to consent because they were sort of administrative items that really should not be distracting, in my opinion, distracting us from the meatier items that we're starting to get to now. And so I guess what I would sort of recommend to the CEO is that we make more of an effort to put those administrative items on the consent.
We talked about that today.
Yeah, and that the consent calendar probably doesn't need to go to the CAC, and we want to focus the CAC's attention and the board's attention on the meatier items. The balance of power mix. That's something we should all be talking about and not be rushing through so that we can spend time on the records retention policy. I mean, really, that is not what any of us should be spending our time on, frankly. If the CEO and our attorney cannot handle that on their own, then we made a big mistake. And I'm not saying you can't. I'm just saying that you've sort of gotten in the habit of bringing everything to the board, and that's not necessary. We have really good staff, and we can lean on them a little bit more to make some of those small decisions. So, thank you.
Anybody else? Go ahead, Director Pilch.
Just want to say that I agree with Commissioner Kalb's and Commissioner Kalb's comments and Commissioner Mandela's comments as well.
Okay. Anybody else? Director Elger.
The Community Advisory Committee, when making this recommendation, was not suggesting that we had to agree. They're suggesting that if there is something that is urgent, then our community is frequently very responsive to supporting the needs of EBCE. The advisory committee was formed to advise on the board's agenda. The way our meeting is set is specifically after your agenda is set. So if there is a space, that there is another place that is accessible to the community to help get all of the incredible human beings who have been super dedicated in trying to make sure this goes in the right direction, that there is a place for those things to come. We have 2 additional meetings set between now and the next time you meet to go through each of these meatier items so that there is time for the community to really weigh in and that our recommendations are thoughtful and informed. Our committee is made of topic experts and the affected constituents, like the people who are actually going to be paying for the electricity. So we advise on the agenda because we are the advisory committee. But the intention of that addition was not so that we had to approve action. It was so that we knew it was happening so that we can mobilize the community in support of EBCE.
Or not. You may not support it. Anybody else? Go ahead.
So on this particular policy, because I think that's what prompted this conversation, it does already say that the executive director will confer with the chair of the board, which I think is appropriate.
Say that again. I'm sorry.
The policy in number 4 says, in these special circumstances, when something can't be brought to the board and when they're using this authority, that they will confer with the chair of the board about whether it's appropriate to take a position on this issue, and I think that's appropriate. I think Dan's suggestion of perhaps maybe sending an email prior to the regular board meeting informing us that the position's been taken may be a good suggestion. So
I think that works, but I also, like I said, I think that if the executive director is going to call the chair for concurrence, I think he needs to call the vice chair too.
Yeah.
I think that's the way I feel.
Both or either?
Huh?
You're saying both?
Yes. Would you agree with that, Director Root?
What if one of you is incommunicado on a plane?
Well, then that's the way it goes, but I think there should at least be an attempt. This is really not it. It's a practice. I don't anticipate something being done that most people would not. I mean, if it's something that this is going to be a split vote here, or in this case, Dan's not going to agree to it, I'm going to agree to it, then we'd probably be better off waiting and bringing it to the full board. Or maybe it's not an issue that we should even be bringing to the board because it's such a split issue. It may not be a good thing for us to even bring it to the public. So I think, you make an attempt to at least get to one of us, the chair and vice chair, but the best is both. And then to Aunt Olivia's point, then advise the community advisory chair, and then also, the executive director will send out a message to the board advising what's been done, but I would caution you, don't reply, because the minute you start replying, you violate the Brown Act. So is that clear?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, that completes that item. The final item that I will be presenting is the last item, which was a process for the board to consider potential policy amendments or amendments to the joint powers agreement. And we've heard a few suggestions for amendments, and our proposal was to sort of gather them and twice a year bring an item before you where you can consider whether or not you want to provide staff with direction to move forward with an amendment, understanding that it will have it will take some time and some staff energy to do. And then if a majority of the board directs staff to move forward with those amendments, then staff would come back with a formal item at a subsequent meeting. So it would be as a discussion and direction item twice per year, assuming there are amendments to consider twice per year, and there may not be. Any questions on this one?
I don't see any.
Okay. And then I think Nick was going to discuss the procurement and the delinquent accounts items.
So on the procurement policy, so the first bullet talks about signing authority. That's authority that was granted in August. I would say sort of the real focus here is to try to put some more detail around when and how we go about competitive procurement processes. So the second bullet, professional services agreements, seeks to give me the flexibility for professional service agreements, so legal work, technical consulting work under the $100,000 threshold, enter into those contracts. Attempt to, seek multiple bids for over $100,000. We will take a sort of maybe a greater effort to seek 3 competitive bids, but for over $100,000, we would bring those to the board for approval. And then for competitive solicitations, these are for non-professional services contracts with contract values over $100,000. We would run a request for proposal process, and that request for proposal would be developed by staff, and there would be a set of sort of specific factors based on the product that is being procured. It may be that we want to look at specific technical competency to provide X, Y, and Z service, and then there are general factors, and those general factors are the special procurement preferences that are outlined here, and those we really look at them as sort of three different categories. One is an Alameda County preference, so these are for businesses located in Alameda County that employ Alameda County residents, at least 25% Alameda County residents. That is the largest preference, the adder or preference that we would provide. The second would be a union labor preference, and that's for the business we're contracting with, or in some cases it's going to be we're working with somebody who then is working with a subcontractor, and for that subcontractor to be a union entity, that is a 2.5 point preference. And the third preference is to support diverse-owned businesses, these are this is an effort to work with businesses that are owned by women, minorities, disabled veterans, and LGBT owners as well, and that would also be a 2.5 point preference, getting to a 10% or a 10-point adder when we look at competitive processes.
Question, Mr. Chair?
Go ahead, Director Root.
Is the intent to rely on the state disadvantaged business enterprise system, or would this be a whole cloth system that EBCE would just accept people at their word that they meet one of these categories?
It would absolutely be to rely on the state's vendor list. So if you indicated that you were a certified business, there's a state database. We could cross-check that you are indeed eligible.
And are LGBT businesses included in that category?
So the California Public Utilities Commission has been working on a database that they require the investor-owned utilities to use, and yes, they have included that category in their database.
Thank you.
Okay.
So that's really the
I would say sort of the core of it. It's contracts for non-professional services over $100,000. We have a very defined process for contracts for non-professional services under $100,000. We would endeavor to consider these factors, but for these smaller size projects, there's some sort of efficiency that we may want to just focus on identifying 3 bidders and then still applying these metrics, but not having a full open competitive solicitation given the size of the contracts. So, as I said, this is a discussion item. I'd very much appreciate feedback from the board, either today, but I'm also would be very happy to have sidebar conversations with any of you or any of your staff or colleagues who may have specific recommendations for adjustments that we may want to make. Again, we're bringing this back in 3 weeks for board approval.
Anybody? So did you say that local participation is only 2.5?
No, 5.
5.
5.
I was going to say 2.5 seemed awful low. Okay. Well, I don't think you're getting much discussion because I'm not hearing it.
Okay.
So maybe everybody's pretty happy.
So I think there was discussion of an amendment to the policy around delegation of authority to the CEO for regulatory and legislative matters. I think the amendment that the chair had suggested was the chair and the vice chair should be consulted in those instances in which you are exercising that authority, and that I think the other suggestion the chair had made was that once that authority is used and the CEO is signing a letter or taking a particular position on behalf of the agency, that the CAC chair will be informed and that communication will be made to the board informing us of the position. So I think that was the one amendment that was discussed, and if this is coming back, if we can just update the language and we can vote on that. I think this item says that if we so choose, we can adopt some of these policies tonight, right?
That is right. So I think for, say, the administrative procurement practice, if the board were to want to do so, we certainly, you are able to do so. There's no resolution that has to be drafted associated with this one.
I mean, I didn't hear any, with the exception of that one policy around the legislative positions. I don't think we had any concerns about the language. So
I will entertain motions.
So I guess I'll move. We can approve all of these, correct? Tonight? Is there notice on the agenda? Well, I have the floor, so I was asking the CEO, what would you like us to do if we were ready to take action?
I think if you're ready to take action, I would say yes, let's take action. And so there is one left. There's the delinquent accounts item that was that I have not touched upon. I can briefly touch upon that item as well, and I may ask Inder to.
I think the way the agenda reads, it says approve policies related to customer confidentiality, processes for considering policy or JPA agreements and amendments. It says discuss policies related to administrative procurement practices, delinquent accounts, and collections. And then it says adopt 2 resolutions regarding delegations of authority to CEO for regulatory and legislative matters and records retention. So I do believe B is really kind of a discuss.
Yeah. So I guess I like to move A and C, and C with the amendment that we discussed regarding the policy on regulatory and legislative matters.
Okay.
Second. I have a motion and a second. Is everybody clear on what we're doing?
Just a clarification, that's with the chair and vice chair and notification requirement amendment.
Yep. Got it.
And the notification requirement to the CAC chair and also to the full board, in which the full board won't respond. Promise? Okay. All right. Okay, so anybody? Discussion? All right. Any objection to the motion? Motion passed without objection. Thank you. So, anything on B? Anything else? All right. then we're going to move.
I'm sorry, did we discuss delinquent accounts?
That's where he's going now, right?
Okay.
You're about to discuss delinquent accounts?
So there's delinquent accounts is the last one, and then that's the last discussion item. There's no action required, and then we can move on. So delinquent accounts, the approach we've taken here is to, we have reviewed the delinquent account policies of all other CCAs where we could get them, and we adopted what we view as the most flexible of the delinquent account policies. So, I think Sean Marshall, actually, you helped us draft this. You, I think, can maybe just give, if you want to just maybe for one moment, to sort of place where our policy in the context of other policies.
How closely, as Sean's coming down, how closely does this mirror PG&E's? I'm just curious.
Well, so the issue you run into with PG&E is that because we can't shut customers off, what we can basically do is if someone doesn't pay their customer, at a certain point you send them back to PG&E. And that's effectively what we're talking about here, is at a certain point their customers are not paying their bill anymore.
So if somebody doesn't pay their PG&E, if somebody doesn't pay us, their punishment is they go back to PG&E as a customer?
Yes.
Right, but that's really led by PG&E.
Okay.
I want
And
to be
then
sure that I'm
PG&E will shut
responsive
them
to
off,
what you
right?
asked me to do.
So, we did a survey of other
Yes.
policies, and we endeavored to come up with a sort of a policy that was more customer friendly than other CCAs. And
Correct.
maybe if you just want to sort of point to one or two areas where that's the case, that would be helpful.
Yes, so forgive me. Good evening, board. Nice to see all of you. I don't have my glasses with me tonight, so you'll have to forgive me. There's a word in here. It's somewhere down here. Apologies. That essentially, the important phrase here is that EBCE may, hold on a minute.
Where are you reading from, and I'll read it for you.
Exactly. So we wanted to structure it so that it was not, that it used the word may, such that it is not an automatic requirement at the end of a 60-day or 90-day period, that it gives EBCE the discretion to deal with those accounts on a case-by-case basis, allowing for the greatest flexibility and liberal treatment for for those customers that are having difficulty. It is important to understand that we do need to interface with PG&E on this issue. They are the entity that will cut service from an account. That is not an EBCE matter. That is a PG&E matter. So what we did is we did look at all the policies of operational CCAs and tried to take it one step further to allow for greater flexibility for those customers.
So once, Sean, once a customer goes to PG&E, say they pay their bill, they get all caught up, can they come back to us, or are they stuck in PG&E forever?
Well, if EBCE makes a decision to return that customer to PG&E,
Right.
that decision places them in a queue to have to stay with PG&E for a year.
Okay.
So that's what happens whether the customer opts out to stay with PG&E or you return a customer to PG&E service. Certainly returning customers to PG&E service is not in EBCE's best interest. That's why we've written it the way we have, to allow for greatest flexibility while still being able to interface with the requirements that PG&E has.
Okay. Director Cobb?
Thank you. So, two questions that may seem at odds with each other. One is, do we have the authority, should the customer, let's say, have a very large overdue bill, have some kind of lien authority, as many jurisdictions have on other matters?
I do not believe so, but I'm not sure.
I do not believe so. No. So,
what's our
collections? Yeah, just
a collection agency.
Is
collection
the
agency.
remedy.
Okay.
Liens are only available for like water or other property-related fees. You're probably familiar with in your work with the
garbage.
city. Yeah. But unfortunately, electric utilities are not considered a property-related fee, and you can, therefore, our only remedy is to go after individuals through the process of collections. We can't put a lien on property.
Okay. And if we were to invite somebody back, we presume they would have to pay up what their past due was before we move them out, or else why would we take them back?
I expect that to be true, but do note that you do have some thresholds here upon which if a customer doesn't pay their bill, if it's under a certain amount, then EBCE does retain the right to go ahead and write off those non-payments, and that has occurred in the past.
Sure.
But it's not high frequency.
Right, and you know, it's bigger delinquent accounts, which would usually be non-residential accounts that one would worry about because that's a lot of money you're not getting. So I want us to kind of have a hammer, the best hammer we can find for those occasional rare big accounts that try to screw us over. And at the same time, for your smaller residential accounts of people who are of modest means, I would hope we would have some, just the opposite of that, some real kind of way we work with them to pay something off over an extended period of time. And I assume we're having some analogous CARE program kind of thing. Are we doing that as well?
Yes, we will. That is a program that continues to be administered by PG&E, though. So, kind of irrespective of whether you're a CCA or a PG&E customer, if you are on CARE, you retain your CARE discount.
Okay.
And remember that PG&E handles customer billing and accounts receivable, and so in certain cases, it's not up to EBCE in terms of how PG&E chooses to deal with their customer as well.
So for a shut-off, for instance, if a customer, if they're not paying PG&E, their collections and their processes supersede ours.
Correct.
So it becomes, if a customer only is paying their PG&E portion of the bill, they're not paying their EBCE portion of the bill. So that's a possibility. You could say, I'm only going to pay the T&D because if I pay that, then I'm fulfilling the requirement to PG&E. And if I'm not paying EBCE, well, you know, they have a less stringent policy than PG&E, and so you could see that happen. I don't think that's quite rare.
I have an important point. So let's say somebody gets a bill or a couple, a month or two overdue, and they pay some of it. They don't know what part they're paying. They're just paying some of it. It doesn't exactly match up anything. And who gets first? PG&E. So we're the last. We're the last.
But it's on a. I just went through this yesterday. It's interesting that's coming up. It's a pro rata share. So PG&E will take the lion's share of that, but there will be a small percentage that is paid to. It's a cure rate. So if a customer pays late and then they pay in the middle of the cycle, so we can get into these details later, but EBC is not out the money entirely, but PG&E does take the lion's share of that. The important part to remember is that when it comes down to cutting a customer's power off, that's not an EBCE function. That is a PG&E function, and the customer needs to come back onto the service on the terms that PG&E requires, which usually does require some kind of deposit and all of that. That doesn't mean that they go off of EBCE's rolls. It just means that under PG&E's requirements, the power got turned off.
Okay, thank you.
Does that answer your questions? So while this is not an item that has come before the CAC yet, I was one of the participants in the More Than Smart Grid Works things looking at the local development business plan, where we learned that in Alameda County we have 106,000 care customers. So if we're looking at folks who may have income fluctuations, may fall behind for a while in bills, and we're looking at sending them back to PG&E for a year, and the sort of embarrassment and whatnot that comes along with not being able to pay your bill. We're talking about, I think it was like 20% of our residential customers or something like that. So we will be going into this really heavily at the upcoming Community Advisory Committee meeting. So if this is important to the public, please attend that or email us so that we can look at your comments there. But also, I would say to make sure that we're really approaching this one with care, because it's such a large percentage of our customers that we wouldn't want to lose, especially when you look at the relative cost of what it cost to cut someone off and bring them back on as opposed to maintaining service.
All right, anybody else?
Okay. So that's it. I think now
Okay, so that's it for today.
Make a motion
on this item. Oh. What? I'm right. Can't do anything. We'll see it again. Okay? No other comments on this item? All right, we're going to move to item 13. You were done, right, Nick? Yep. Yeah. Let's move to item 13. Getting late.
I'd like to welcome my colleague Supriya Renate to give a presentation on EBC's risk policy and risk guidelines. Here. And just one note that this is a pretty meaty document that we're providing an overview of. This document will be brought back on the 7th for board approval. I invite any board members who have a specific interest in digging into our energy risk management policies and regulations to let us know, and we would be happy to provide a briefing.
Push the button.
It'll be ready. There you go. Thank you. Thank you for everyone. Good evening, everyone. Board members and audience members. I will be going over a couple different presentations tonight on wholesale procurement. First, I will be addressing energy risk management policies, our recommendations to move forward, as well as procurement strategies, as well as portfolio design, and then going into contracts a little bit later to understand how we are entering and running our procurement and supply options. So before I begin, I'd like to mention that the policies and the guidelines that we are putting forth for recommendation today really stem from the policies and guidelines from the Northern California Power Agency and their member organizations, which are 12 members, several which are located here in Alameda County, the BART Port, as well as Alameda Municipal District. And so in this way, East Bay Community Energy would like to develop and modify risk guidelines and policies in accordance to other public power entities in this area and really understand how their operations have been successful and adopt those similar guidelines. So to begin, in order to address risk management strategies, we have to understand what energy risk is. Energy risk comprised of 5 different categories. There's volumetric risk, which is quite simply supply of energy generation resources, and then understanding the demand of our customers. The next part is operational risk, and this is not necessarily addressing East Bay staff, but really understanding that the organization has the tools in place to manage load, to settle load, to forecast load, and this is what we are contracting with the Northern California Power Agency on. Regulatory risk and political risk really identifies all of the different regulations and policies that affect every single load-serving entity in California, including CCAs, and for us to identify and be able to digest and make recommendations for procurement strategies based on these certain risks. Credit risk is the next one, perhaps the most translatable across energy markets and other industries. Credit risk is quite simply understanding your counterparty's financial health and is managed by adopting and using their industry standard contracts. Price risk is very simply the price of each contract and how it evolves over time based on different market conditions. Price risk also takes into account how the contract price of a single contract affects the overall portfolio decisions and procurement strategies. So let's move on to risk mitigation strategies. And again, these are the foundational principles of the Northern California Power Agency and its associated members. So to address volumetric risk, supply and demand, there are certain ways we can do that. One is, looking at generation resources and really understanding generation profiles and how they affect our portfolio, and then looking at East Bay customer demand and understanding from a load forecasting point of view how we are quantifying and analyzing our load in order to be able to hedge appropriately given different conditions. Price risk. Really, there's a lot of things that affect pricing in a market, and supply and demand is one of them. And East Bay Community Energy really needs to understand and put into practice the tools that identify market price risk, that track market price, and understand as we integrate more and more renewable resources into our supply strategy, how the different intermittent generation profiles affect our overall load and consequently our balancing requirements. And in this way, in order to risk manage this, we have to understand what our total open position is, meaning our total load obligation to East Bay customers, to really identify rate stability and maintain rate stability, and as well as looking at our overall portfolio and all the associated costs affecting each and every contract, and again, in the effort to risk manage our rate stability. Credit risk is quite simply managed, like I mentioned earlier, by using industry standard contracts, and I will be getting into that, I believe, in a couple different items. There's 2 different industry standard contracts that are widely used by over 500 load-serving entities in the Western Electric Regional Coordination Council, or what we call the WEC. There are the Energy Electric Institute, the Edison Electric Institute Master Agreement and the associated confirms, as well as the Western System Power Pool Agreements, or the WSVP contract. So to move forward, East Bay Community Energy would like to recommend the board to review and understand these risk policies and guidelines, and then our recommendation would be to have our executive director move forward and develop what we call the Risk Oversight Committee to really understand and govern the supply procurement strategies of East Bay Community Energy. And what we call the ROC, or the Risk Oversight Committee, will be comprised of select board members and other market stakeholders to, again, meet on a regular basis at a predetermined schedule to, again, review and to modify and opine on the different energy positions put forth by East Bay. Are there any questions on that? Before we move on?
I thought you motioned.
I actually do when you're done, but
we're done.
She asked if there's a
okay. So I guess this is a big topic, right? And I'm not going to pretend that I have a complete understanding of it, but I do think I get the general parameters here. So I'm wondering what sort of direction are you looking for from the board today, aside from, yes, we should pay attention to risk and try to minimize it?
So what I would say in terms of direction is, on this particular, and probably no specific direction, we want to introduce what is a very dense and complex topic, and say, we're thinking about these things. We want to engage more deeply with our stakeholders around these items. We are going to be bringing this, the energy risk management policies and then detailed regulations around energy risk management back to the board on the 7th. For approval. It's critical to have your energy risk management policies and guidelines in place before you go out there and start buying energy. Otherwise, you don't have the frameworks to make sure that the energy you're buying is, not going to create outsized risks or unknown risks down the line. So this is an educational opportunity for the board. Also understanding we have a lot of agenda items here. We didn't want to spend 45 minutes educating either. That was the intention.
Well, I guess what I would just say is that I think this is an item that's going to require some depth and attention for the people who are making these decisions. So I think forming a committee, perhaps having a board member on there, and staff members, outside advisors, whatever, is a good idea. So they can really dig into this and come back and put forward a more substantial set of recommendations with. This is what you're recommending as part of the policy, as I'm understanding it, right? So, sort of a team that's going to be focused on this and providing the core wisdom and experience and intelligence around this particular issue, right?
That's right. And then this risk oversight committee will they will serve as an ad hoc committee to the chief executive officer. So it's not a Brown Act committee. Mm-hmm. But they will be, on a monthly, quarterly basis, be reviewing our performance and making sure that we're abiding by all these parameters. And then that group will report back to the full board to say, yes, here are the policies that we have. Are we abiding by those policies? The answer should always be yes, but That's the function. In the early days, it's also sort of the development of some more of these regulations. A lot of these regulations have been pretty well developed for other load-serving entities, so that's one of the benefits of NCPA is that they've developed the policies, but also the real detailed requirements for all of the, not all, but many of their member agencies. They've done it for another CCA as well, Pioneer, which is the Placer County CCA. So they're really very well versed, and so we're really sort of leaning on them to bring forward what the industry best practice is, and then the ROC will be there to ensure that we are doing what we say we're going to do.
Okay, thank you. That clarification is helpful. I appreciate it, and it sounds like a good direction. So, thank you.
I thought when I read the report, it said it was a Brown Act committee.
So, risk oversight committees for the other municipal utilities, these are Brown Act boards. For NCPA, they are not Brown Act. Their risk oversight committees are not Brown Act.
I thought I saw it. Okay. All right. Yes, Director Rood.
What is the composition of the Risk Oversight Committee? Has that been determined?
It has not been determined. One of the requirements, because it is not a Brown Act committee, is that it is a group that is selected by the executive director or the CEO. Generally, in other cases, NCPA has found that they would have one representative who serves on the ROC. You would generally have a member of your governing board. You may have one member of staff, and then you may hire an outside subject matter expert. Somebody who actually has experience in energy but is not a market participant. What you really don't want here is somebody who they're going to be seeing confidential pricing information. You don't want somebody who could potentially have a conflict of interest because they're seeing what energy supply options and prices are we seeing, and then could take that information and use it to their advantage. So that has been a typical composition. I think we haven't come up with a recommendation for what the composition is, though.
Okay, but it's not spelled out in the document before us?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else on this?
All right. So now that we've defined what our recommendation is for risk management, we'll go into power procurement. Oops. Let's pull up our slides. 1 second. So taking from our JPA, there's really 4 guiding principles that East Bay will be using to enter into supply contracts and govern our overall strategy. The first is, of course, doing so with the proper risk governances in place, and just discuss that. The second is really looking at and identifying resources here within Alameda County and in the state of California to the extent available and to the extent price competitive. The third is really understanding how we can provide and manage rate stability for all of our customers and really provide competitive rates, based on the incumbent IOU, and to create competition in those sorts of lower rate structures. The fourth is looking at and identifying and understanding all of the climate goals of Alameda County jurisdictions that are involved in East Bay service territories, and also to understanding the renewable energy goals of the state of California and how we can meet and potentially exceed those goals in the effort to really provide a good climate solution for the entire county. So just to summarize, we're looking, when we think about portfolio content, we're looking at both climate goals of Alameda County as well as renewable energy goals in the state of California to really guide our supply content, in addition to providing rate stability and low costs. This slide just summarizes, again, the different climate goals associated with each jurisdiction involved in the East Bay Community Service Territory, and how we are incorporating all of these different metrics in supporting these goals and climate action plans of each city. The California Renewable Energy Standard is currently under Senate Bill 350, and we're currently in compliance period 3. The reason why we want to understand that is because at a bare minimum, East Bay Community Energy will absolutely be meeting its compliance requirements, if not exceeding its renewable energy goals using these metrics. The compliance period 3 requirements are 75% what we call portfolio content category 1, or bucket 1 as the industry terms it, and these are really bundled deals that are sourced from inside the California Balancing Authority or the California ISO. The second category of renewable energy products that we'll be procuring are called portfolio content category 2, or what the industry terms as bucket 2. And these are essentially deals that are sourced typically from outside the California Balancing Authority, from another balancing authority, say Pacific Core, coming into the Cal ISO. And the difference between the two products, they're still both bundled products, but the difference is really coming into how that energy is scheduled into our balancing authority and the associated delivery of that energy to us. I'd like to actually note very quickly that, in our implementation plan, we note that we're not buying unbundled renewable energy credits, and we are keeping to that policy today and forward. So here's a general supply picture, and I think the real point of the slide is to understand that, while we are looking for and sourcing Alameda-sited and California-sited projects for the short term, again, to really ensure rate stability for all of our customers, we will be procuring energy from the greater WEC, or the Western Electric Coordination Council. The WEC is large. The WEC has diverse resources, and again, when we talk about, mitigating volumetric risk and managing our open positions, what we call our load obligations, it's important to really diversify our resource base and to look to the greater region to source these supply needs for our customers, again, to provide rate stability and clean content. Here's our load forecast. Just very quickly, the point of this is to go over exactly what our demand is and what our load obligations are as we look forward to June and that June launch, and covering our load obligations for customers. These load forecasts were developed by the most complete data set we have, and most CCAs have launching this year, which is the PG&E 2016 data set. And what we have done is really worked with NCPA, the Northern California Power Agency, to work with their load forecasting models to develop a very clear picture of what those obligations are. We looked at each customer under each rate class, assigned assumptions on those load profiles, and then layered upon that a weather profile of the 8 different climate zones within Alameda County, again, to really define exactly what our load obligations are so we can accurately cover and manage our positions. There's a lot of numbers. This is our energy duration curve, and what I will do, if allowed, is actually go to the graphical representation of these numbers. And quite simply, what is an energy duration curve is the procurement recommendation from our risk energy guidelines from what we call coverage ratios and what are developed from a time price matrix. And essentially what does that mean is that as we go into an open position, or what we call a load obligation, what percentage of that load obligation are we going to cover and when? And this is our initial procurement recommendation from the Northern California Power Agency, again, in accordance to the risk guidelines and policies set forth by themselves as well as their member communities. And the purpose of this is how we will be entering into our procurement for the first solicitation. Load duration, same principle. This is how we would be procuring capacity. Again, as we enter into our open position in June, our load obligation, what percentage of that obligation will we be covering and when? And really the purpose of this is to explain that, initially we'll be covering a lot of our initial requirements using very close to 100% hedge strategy, but we want to incorporate different RPS products. We want to incorporate renewable generation and long-term contracts into our supply mix. And therefore we will not be hedging 100% of our load obligations for the next 2 years, because we want to, again, diversify our resource mix. So when we look at all the supply options, I think we can group them into 3 different buckets. We have our renewable energy products, we have our carbon-free products, and again, in our short term, we'll be looking to the greater WEC system to be able to provide rate stability and competitive rates for our customers. So our recommendation for a path forward here at East Bay is to really understand the governances and the portfolio content supply options in order to make the best supply decision and the best content decision based on both competitive rates and the cleanest sources of energy. And we recommend that, we take the next couple of weeks to really understand the different risks associated with procurement and the different costs associated with procurement, and really make a sound decision that will de-risk our supply strategy today and for the long term. So to go over some of the different pricing options, and again, these are not our only options. These are some options that we were able to price up, again, with the Northern California Power Agency, to really give a sense of the idea that as we increase our clean energy content, prices are increasing, and that's the reality of the markets today. And so therefore, taking a look at this, we put together a few different scenarios to help guide our decisions into actually defining exactly what our content will be. And I want to really clarify here that these are all-in costs of serving wholesale procurement. So these costs account for all of the different Cal ISO, or our balancing authority charge codes. That's R65, R60, R61, and 62. These costs account for our resource adequacy requirements, which are capacity requirements, which we spoke about earlier, are a little bit contentious right now, and are subject to higher pricing. And so naturally, these prices look a little bit higher than, say, last year, because the market has changed, and we really have to account for that when we define and put parameters around our supply strategies. It also accounts for the price of energy, which is typically between $30 and $32 if you look at just the spot market pricing, or what we call the current market pricing. And it also accounts for what we call the environmental premium, or the renewable energy premium, that is associated with the supply content. So understandably, there's contracts out there that, we hear about from the CEC, or, market data, or some news articles saying that, solar is at an all-time low. Well, when we're actually scheduling these resources into our default load aggregation point, or our location, these items cost more money, and we have to pay Cal ISO fees, and we have to bake those fees into our wholesale costs and then translate into our retail rates. And we have to understand that pricing very well, because we have to, again, provide competitive rates and ensure rate stability for our customers. So as we, again, define and really create balance around what we will be supplying to our customers and how we will design our portfolio of options, we really have to understand, the market today is, subject to significant amount of risks. And just to go over 3 of those risks, again, going back to our discussion on risk on the earlier slides, we are facing CCAs and all load-serving entities in the state of California, significant risks on what we can actually procure. So, for example, as we look at our RPS obligations, we look at portfolio content category 1 and 2, and now we are introducing, or the legislature and the CPUC is introducing, different greenhouse gas reporting requirements that make our supply options a little bit more expensive. We spoke about the PCIA and the fact that, again, the resource adequacy pricing has increased in value year over year when we look at 2016 and 2017. And, when we look at price risk, again, we have to understand how, when we integrate renewable energy generation, the generation profiles of intermittent resources such as wind and solar can be very different from our own load profile. And therefore, we have to be able to account for what we call the balancing costs. So procuring the costs associated around that generation profile. And they're very real as we onboard more and more solar and wind into our balancing authority. And we have to risk manage that. Volumetric risk, again, we have to look at supply and demand of all of the different products that we are procuring, RPS products, capacity products, and energy products. And we have to really be able to understand how those different analytics and different supply options affect our supply decisions today for the long term, to be able to provide rate stability tomorrow. So again, our recommendation would be to really digest what the market risks are, as well as what our supply options are, and again, weigh our portfolio content on those 4 different parameters that we identified earlier. Again, these are taken from our JPA. Risk management strategies, Alameda County cited and California cited to the extent available. Again, providing lower cost to our customers and equitable energy for everyone. And then, of course, meeting and supporting Alameda County jurisdiction's climate goals, and of course the California state mandate of renewable energy portfolio standard. That's it. Do you have any questions?
Director Martinez.
Thank you, Supriya. Can you bring us back to the 2018-2019 load forecast?
Yes. Oops. Yes.
I just have a question on here. So are we assuming for the purpose of this forecast that our phase 2 is not happening until the first quarter of 2019?
Let me answer that. I think because there's some uncertainty, we have to sort of bound our scenarios. And so for this particular scenario, we looked at a January 1 phase. One of the reasons for that is because of getting back to this question of resource adequacy, it's a calendar year requirement. So from a pricing perspective, it was convenient to look at, we're going to bring on a whole new set of load at the beginning of the year, and that gives us, we'll be looking at a full year resource adequacy obligation. The reality is pricing, if you were to look at bringing customers on, say, in October or November, pricing may shift some. It's not significant. So this is a view. It's not going to be, as we think about phasing, it doesn't significantly change some of the underlying pricing dynamics.
So it doesn't put us in a bad position or constrain us when we're...
So there are some potentially increased energy procurement costs, but then you're also generating more revenue sooner. So there's also kind of that interplay. And that's something that, as we start to sort of hone in on what our power content goals are and our rate discounts, that then is going to be a key sort of, that will be a key piece of information that we're going to want to feed into thinking about exactly when we want to phase in residential customers.
Okay, thank you. I understand there are a lot of moving parts. I just want to stay transparent about when we're going to be fully locked and loaded for the community.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Dr. Ellis?
So my understanding of wholesale procurement and all this stuff is rapidly developing, but still new. When you had the slide about the resource adequacy pricing, that is an increase from last year, and I'm wondering if one of those policies that you were talking about, like being able to purchase energy at the cost from the utilities as opposed to market rate, now is an option that might, if that works, if that will end up bringing those relative costs down back to what we were looking at last year, or is that not?
No, that's a great point, and we are actually in discussion with PG&E to be able to, see what supply, if they have that supply, resource adequacy, and potentially contract with them. But right now, I think the whole issue is it's unclear, why market pricing is high, and the CPUC, alongside with the Cal ISO, have to work through these different issues. If it's indeed just an accounting error based on when RA obligations are assigned on both an annual basis and then a balance of year basis, and I think once those issues are worked through, once the data is presented, then I think we'll be able to, understand procurement better, and I think there'll be more market stability. But that's the kind of current situation right now, is there's a lot of uncertainty as to why the pricing is higher.
Okay.
Any questions?
I think that's it.
That's it from right now. Thank you.
Nick? Are we done with this?
So there is a public comment, I believe, on this item?
I didn't have public comment on this item.
13, 14? Is that 13?
This is 14.
Huh?
Is that 13 and 14 together?
No.
No.
It's 13.
Just 13.
Did you want to speak? Okay, I don't have a card on this from you. What? We have the handout, but even that's marked number 14. Go ahead.
So obviously a complicated subject.
Mike.
I'd just like to take us back to the beginning. The promise of EBCE was to provide products that were lower in greenhouse gas emissions than PG&E at a competitive price with a higher renewable energy content. That's baked into the JPA and actually gives cities the opportunity to leave the JPA if those three requirements are not met. So I just want to point out to you that also that the cities, when we were going around talking to them about forming a JPA, we're very interested in the GHG reductions in order to be able to meet their climate action plan goals. I just want to bring you up to date. PG&E as of 2016 is at 69% greenhouse gas free and 23% renewable. Documents that they've submitted to the CPUC for 2017 and 2018 indicate that next year, or 2017, they'll be 71% GHG free, and in 2018, they'll be up to 88% GHG free. That means, based on what many of us have heard Nick say, we want to be 10% better than PG&E on GHGs. So if we're launching this program this year, we've essentially got to be 100% GHG free at launch. The 4 examples that were provided to you in the packet, only one of which actually meets that criteria, which is example 4. And so I would urge you as a board not to spend too much time in looking at these other examples. I think we need to direct our staff here to find combinations of power and price that actually bring that promise home to the cities that signed up for this, that we actually make a big dent in their greenhouse gas emissions. I also want to say something about the prices. It's true that the market is very volatile, but the CPUC has indicated that the average price for utility scale solar in California was $30 a megawatt hour in 2016, $51 a megawatt hour for wind. And so I think if we start looking at how these prices that are being shown to you here are actually broken down, we might get a sense of where we might get some savings. For example, we don't need to procure 100% bucket 1 power. We have the ability to procure up to 25% bucket 2 power. And I'm just going to say in my last few seconds, this is heresy I know here, but this JPA also agreed to allow us to include 50% of the RPS requirements in bucket 3 recs to give us some flexibility so that we didn't get stuck into a position that we had to make some serious trade-offs. That said, the JPA also says that if we acquire those bucket 3 recs from within our service territory, there's no restriction on the number that we can use. So I'm encouraging more creative thinking, not locking us into something that, you know, we've talked about being the best program in California. We're certainly not going to be there if we're, only hitting 30% renewables and 55% GHG power. Thank you.
Okay. No other questions? Go ahead, Al.
So I'd kind of like our CEO or our team to respond to what Mr. Kelly was saying. You know, are 3 of the 4 scenarios presented, not in compliance with our mission statement?
What I would say is these scenarios are real prices in the market. And so certainly there are levers that we can push. We can go, the way you look at the least expensive energy is market energy that is not renewable. The second sort of lowest cost source of energy is zero carbon. And there's a relatively small premium to market. And then the third most expensive, or the second most expensive energy is the sort of outside of California renewable, and the most is the inside California renewable. And if we think it's really a question of we have a defined bucket of money and what are our priorities. And the next section I'm going to be talking about are rate discounts, because there's a dynamic there. So if we say we want to be more renewable and lower GHG. If that's our priority, we have to understand that that's going to result in how much more renewable and how much lower GHG, that's going to have an impact on our ability to deliver a rate discount. I think one really critical consideration here is this is not about what we do in 2018. We should not measure our greenhouse gas reductions solely by the reductions we're able to deliver in 2018. It's what is our long-term trajectory? When do we get to zero carbon for all of our supply for the long term? It's not going to be market purchases. It's really going to be long-term contracts. Those take a while to build. New wind, new solar at scale, whether in the county or out, doesn't get built tomorrow. We're talking about multiple years. And so I think and that's what I think Supriya's point about climate action plans. Your climate action plans do not focus on what is my 2018 goal. It's 2020, 2025. And I think what we want to think about doing is building a strong entity, financially strong, that makes some down payments today on renewable energy, on carbon content, but really focus on how do we deliver in 2020 and in 2025 on sort of the three goals, right, of the JPA. It's price, it's clean, and it's community. But that's generally the approach. And I think when we think about the feedback we want over the coming weeks and what we're going to be coming back with on the 7th, it very well may not be any one of those 4 scenarios. I think what we want to come back with are 1 or 2 options that we think these are the options that best situate us to deliver on a rate discount that we think is going to be sufficient enough to keep our customers with us and deliver some benefit, that is going to give us the financial flexibility to pay down our debt and build reserves, to make some initial investments in local development, and also, be very clean and, and demonstrate the commitment. That's the direction we want to go.
2 quick points is that the all-in costs that we presented here today, again, are the all-in costs of serving and receiving wholesale energy in California ISO. And so therefore, they bake into the cost those 4 charge codes that I mentioned. They bake into the cost of resource adequacy pricing that has increased year over year. They bake into the cost the price of energy, as well as the environmental premium. So when we look at CEC data, we're just looking at that contract price, but there's 6 variables that affect that all-in price. So just wanted to clarify.
So,
Olivia.
It might help a little bit with framing. So my understanding when I read this is that there's a set of considerations that we take, that we look at when we are going to be setting our rates, because we need to look at the cost to our customers and our ability to retain them, the different profit that will result, like how quickly we can pay back our debt, how quickly we can build financial reserves, and how much and how quickly we can put into local development. And the idea of this presentation, and actually the next several, would be to present a variety of scenarios so that the board and the public can take a look at the trade-offs and give some feedback at this point, so that over the next 3 weeks, our staff can take a look at that feedback and present us with something so we can make some rate-setting goals at the February 7th meeting, and look at how those things in conjunction affect some of our other goals, like long-term climate impacts. So the immediate short-term GHG might actually, which is just one factor, greenhouse gas is just one factor, might actually, to Nick's point, we may have a greater cumulative effect if we take a look at these things. But the idea of the presentation is not actually to set it tonight. It's to allow people to take a look over the next 3 weeks, give feedback to staff so that they understand more clearly our priorities within these policies, and then they can bring us scenarios at the 7th.
That's how I understood it. So does anybody else wish to give any feedback? Okay.
I will then go to the next item 15, which is a brief overview on the rate setting process. I think first...
Wait. You're going
sorry.
to 15? You said you're going to 15?
That was 14 that we were on.
I have speakers on 14 then.
Yeah, we did 13 and 14 together.
Huh? Well, you asked that question, they said no.
I thought we did 13 and 14 together.
Well, I heard nothing about hedging options, but... Okay, Barbara Stebbins. Sorry. Must be getting late.
I'll be very brief.
Take your time, Barbara. She's going to give you 3 minutes.
Now it is. The East Bay Clean Power Alliance would just like to remind you that there is a local development business plan out there that is underway, that is producing a lot of work products. And in terms of the power supply procurement, that we hope that the proposals being brought forth from that plan will be figured into all of the power procurement mix, because it's one way to avoid risk in the market too.
Okay. All right. Rate options.
So this first slide is I think stuff that we all are familiar with. PG&E provides the bill. The board sets the rates. I think that's an important point that we we'll be getting to over the course of the next few weeks. But then on an ongoing basis, really is this governing board is in charge of setting the rates for our customers. And one of the things we're going to be working to develop is what is the ongoing process for setting rates. It really should be an annual process. So every year you look at what the cost of service is, what your revenue requirement is, and then that sort of determines what your rates are based on your power supply.
Oh yeah, she did do 14.
So the process of setting rates is, in our case, is not particularly complicated because we are going to be mirroring PG&E's rates. The complexity of rate design is, what do you charge at any given hour, or for blocks we're going to be mirroring PG&E. Our rate design process is really about what our discount to PG&E is, but the components of our rates are what is our cost of generation, and then what is the PCIA. And you take those two, you add them up, that needs to be less than PG&E. And that gets you to what your margin is, and then you look at your margin and you start to think about what your sort of flexibility around discounts are. We will be offering our customers, as I mentioned, all the relevant PG&E rates. These are a list of the primary rates that PG&E offers that we will be replicating. I can move off this one pretty quickly. I think this is the really important one. It's this sort of concept of revenue requirement. So first things first, when we think about setting rates, we first and foremost need to make sure that we're covering costs. The drivers of cost are cost of operations. That's 95% the cost of energy. And then our services like data management, billing, call center, marketing, staffing, and overhead. Second is debt service. We need to pay the county back, and we're going to have a line of credit with Barclays that we're going to use to get into the market. We got to make sure that we're paying our debt and maintaining all of our key covenants there around debt coverage ratios. And then the third is setting aside reserve requirements. One of the things that you find when you buy energy is you need to post collateral. Right now we have no money to post collateral. We're borrowing money to post collateral. So it's critical to build pretty significant financial reserves so that you can do things like post collateral. That actually lets you get lower priced energy. So we think about what's our cost of energy, what's our debt service, and what is sort of our reasonable contribution to our reserve. What's our target every year? That's our revenue requirement. We need to make sure that our rates, and that inclusive of our discount, equals to or is equal to or greater than that revenue requirement. So thinking about the rate, so then the big question is, what is our discount going to be, and what are the drivers of discount? I think there are sort of three key factors I want to focus on here because we have talked about energy. One is what is our target bill savings. So here I was looking at an illustrative example of a 2 to 3% discount. You see it's pretty small savings for the average residential customer. But when you start to look at a larger customer, $12,000, $20,000 a year is not insignificant. Certainly as you go from 3% to 3-4%, or even higher, those numbers are going to get a little bit bigger. But as you increase your discount, you have potentially less. You have less resources to contribute to reserves by paying down your debt more quickly, establishing reserves for collateral that's necessary to enter into long-term contracts, and then having that rainy day fund in case the PCIA gets much worse than we think it's going to get. And then finally, it's setting aside funds for community development. I will note that 10% surplus would net $5 million, not $10 million. That was an error on my part. But setting aside 10% of surplus income could, after a full year of operations, would net $5 million for programs and local development initiatives. But the key factor is there's a single pot of money. And where you take out for one thing, that means that there's less to do other things. I think that's just the dynamic that's the reality that we're faced with. And that's when we think about what the recommendation is going to be next month. I think we want to think about what the right balance there is, particularly also factoring the energy supply scenarios. And we want to come with what is the most balanced approach we can take at launch that really does make sure that we are in a financially sound place so that we can persist and sort of make it through the ups and downs of what is a hard to operate in a California energy market. So that's more or less the points I made here. So there you go.
So Nick, have you looked at other CCEs to see if what their percentages they want to be below PG&E? Have you looked around there?
Absolutely. So the range tends to be sort of 2 to 5% is the range. So 1 to 5%. So the most recent CCA to launch, Pioneer in Placer County, launched with a 2% discount, I believe.
What is the one over, all of a sudden I went brain dead on their name.
San Mateo County?
No, Santa Clara.
Santa Clara. So Silicon Valley launched at a 2% discount. 1% Silicon Valley, so Santa Clara County launched at a 1% discount. Monterey Bay is launching at no discount, but at the end of the year there's a dividend that should reflect, if they have enough left over at the end, they will dividend up to 3% back, but there's no guarantee in any given month. They're really going to wait till the end of the year to make sure they've built enough reserves. There's quite a bit of variance.
Who's the highest?
Peninsula, which is San Mateo County, has a 5% discount. One thing that's interesting, though, if you think about Santa Clara and San Mateo counties, we have a 1% discount and a 5% discount, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sean, but very similar opt-outs. Yes. So between 1% and 5%, no real significant difference in customer opt-out rates. Very similar types of customers, similar kinds of businesses. A lot of similarities between San Mateo and Santa Clara from a demographic perspective, yet very similar opt-outs. So I think the key really is delivering some savings. When you think about opt-out rates, you want to be able to say we are delivering a savings. What exactly that savings is tends to be a nuance that a lot of customers are not as focused on. But certainly, more money in people's pockets does matter, and I don't want to minimize that one either.
To anybody else? Al?
It's not too early to offer a little feedback and guidance here on what that set of trade-offs looks like, right? Because you're going to be coming to us at the next meeting with some proposals, right?
Absolutely, that would be very helpful.
So my thoughts are as follows. I think, in the long run, I don't worry about our ability to meet all three of the goals that we've set forth, which is cheaper, greener, and more local. To summarize the three legs of the stool that I see as the benefits we're providing. I'm starting to wonder if in the short term, in year one, we're going to be able to hit all three. So I guess what I would say is that I would prioritize those three as follows. We have to be cheaper. We must be cheaper. In my opinion, we can debate how much cheaper. I would say it needs to be at least 2%. But we have to be cheaper in order to get people to sign up for this. We have one chance at convincing people not to opt out at the very beginning. And if it's not cheaper, lots of folks are going to opt out. And I don't want that, because then we lose the benefit of all the great things we're going to do long term with so many users. So it has to be cheaper. I would say we need to meet or exceed PG&E on the green front. And I would emphasize there the GHG aspect of the green. For me personally, it'd be nice if we could match them on the renewable at least, but exceed them on the total GHG. For me, this is about preventing, global warming and climate change, and it's the GHG that does that. So that's the number I'm most interested in, which turns out to be a good thing because the GHG-free is a lot less expensive than the renewable, and so maybe that helps with the finances a little bit. And then the amount that we're able to dedicate towards the more local in year one is whatever's left, frankly. And hopefully there'll be some left. I'm really hoping that we have some in year one. I think that's a big deal and a big part of what we're trying to do here. But if it comes right down to it, must be cheaper, better be greener, and hopefully in year one more local. So those are my priorities, and I hope that helps as you're putting together the proposals for next meeting.
I would say well said, except for make sure you pay back Alameda County.
Dan. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for that presentation. Appreciate it very much. I know we've had discussions or comments in the past, but I don't know if we landed on, are we going to be offering three choices, a base choice, and then two greener choices? That was my hope, was we were going to do three and not two, and that's what people had mentioned all along, but we never made any decision. So I'm just hoping that we still go with at least a base and then two greener choices for people to opt up to. Right, so that's my hope, whatever those happen to be. And I did also remember during the JPA formation discussion, there was a desire and an appropriate desire to always be better than whatever the RPS requirement is for in this case PG&E, that we would always show better than that. Okay, they're at a certain point in time, they're at 30%, they're at 33%, they're at whatever they're going to be at for that year, and we're going to be some percentage points better than that in our renewables procurement. That was also something that we, again, informally discussed. There seemed to be a lot of consensus on during the formation stage that brought us to where we are today. In terms of the carbon-free, obviously that is our long-term goal. Even though we know Diablo is going to be phasing out, it's not phased out yet, and that's one of the reasons why, at least for the next X number of years, PG&E is able to say, and show itself carbon-free. Plus they have, I presume they still have these long-term contracts with very cheap hydro in and near our state. Right? So that's still, they have, I don't know how much opportunity we will have to buy some of that hydro or some of that is maybe not RPS eligible, but still carbon free. I'm not sure what our opportunities are there. You all will know that better than us, but we're looking for that. The sweet spot may not exist in the first couple of years, but we're looking for something that's good that we could sell to our customers at lower rates, somewhat lower rates, but also sell to our broader community as to why we're doing this in the first place. So that's And I'm sure it's going to be very easy. I'm kidding. I know it's a lot of hard work to do that, so thank you for the work you're going to be doing. It's going to be difficult, and we hope to support you in that effort.
Director Pilch.
Thank you. I substantially agree with the comments from Board Member Mendal. I would just add one thing, well, two things. One is that I thought we heard some very good data there from our CEO that the opt-out rates for 1% versus, I can't remember what the two numbers were, but 1% versus some other number, 5, were the same. So, yeah, a discount would be good, but, I don't think we have to go to a big discount. People do respond to that discount, though, and I think any discount will be attractive. And then the second thing is I agree with your prioritization, and I had a very strong plea from staff about the greenhouse gas reduction goals, and they being very interested in, this is a big deal in my city. The power is a big greenhouse gas generator, and goes towards, and in reducing that will substantially reduce our greenhouse gas goals for the city. So, so I concur that that should, to the extent possible, we should keep pushing the greenhouse gas reductions.
Dr. Elvis? Who's down there? Okay.
So looking at these things, we are looking forward to receiving feedback and scenarios and whatnot. My personal research, when I'm looking at the costs associated with launching multiple products, I'm looking forward to getting some information back about what is the cost difference for us in launching 2 versus 3 at the beginning, because those numbers might be there, but I haven't read them yet. Also looking at like where opt-up and opt-out rates are high. The opt-out rate difference is most significant in the few places that have done 100% default, because it does get more expensive.
We actually have a presentation on a third product and 100% default.
Oh, sweet. Then I'll get there. And then looking at different opt-up rates, I've met with energy boards and community advocacy groups in California, Oregon, and Massachusetts, because that's where my travels took me. And the opt-up rates have been not terribly strong unless there have been dedicated people going around and talking to people and saying you should opt up in this thing. But like MCE is taking some of the revenue from their opt-up products and putting that into local development. And I'm also looking at what would like the greener options or the local options or the whatever, what does that cost turn into? So if you look at MCE's local sold, that energy is a very expensive thing. So I'm looking forward to, over the next weeks, looking at what all those different things look like so that we can make a recommendation based off of those trade-offs.
Director Martinez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to echo my colleagues who called out greenhouse gases. My city is also interested in adding weight to reducing our greenhouse gas output, and so just wanted to throw that out, that we'd be interested in seeing those products.
Dr. Cobb.
Thank you. I just want to make 2 more things. One, and I know that there'll be more of a discussion later, but in terms of marketing and the opting up is about marketing. If you have 3 products, you'll get more people into the second product as opposed to just having 2 products. That's the general marketing, advertising belief. I don't know if it's true, but I think it probably is. But more importantly, the renewables industries, let's say solar, for example, although other renewables as well, it's still not what we would call there. It's still not mature. It's still not settled and mature and totally safe. And part of the reasons why the state has created incentives and requirements is to help that industry grow and mature. And it's moved a huge amount in the past 10, 15 years compared to 30 years before that, but it still has a ways to go. And so part of the reason we have an RPS in our state, and the reason we have, whether it's requirements by the PUC or our own choices that we make as CCAs to focus in part on more renewables procurement, is because we're helping the industry grow and mature and solidify, and that in the long run helps us better achieve our greenhouse gas goals. And so let's not forget that as we're procuring, and that's a reason why we want to do better than the minimum RPS requirement in a given year that the state tells us to do. And that's because we're going to be helping the industry grow and mature even more, and that's going to help us down the road meet our greenhouse gas goals even more safely. So that's my 2 cents.
Director Harrington?
So I agree with all the comments that have been made, and obviously the cost is going to be a critical factor, so we can actually be competitive and not lose a lot of customers at launch. But I think the local development as well as the environmental benefits were key components as to why this whole program was launched. And from my city's perspective, really critical to meeting our climate action goals is, to the extent possible, maximizing the greenhouse gas reduction benefit from this program. So I want to strongly support what the Vice Chair and Director Mendel said as what I think the priority should be going forward.
So, I think that's exactly the feedback that I was hoping to hear. I think one thing, this will not be something we talk about, I think, in 3 weeks. I think we'll be coming back with some near-term recommendations. But I do think that in the coming months, we will be, from an analytical perspective, ready to have a conversation about setting some sort of more medium-term targets, because I think those are the targets that really are most significant. It's not what our power content in 2018 is going to be, but what is our goal for 2020, 2023, 2025? And so do we want to endeavor to be 100% renewable energy in 2025? What are the implications of that? That's a conversation I think we need to have, and I think that's really goes much more to the heart of the city's goals than in 2018, what exactly is our power content going to be? So not that I want to lose sight of that 2018 priority, because it's really important, but it's really that longer term, and I think that we will be ready to have that discussion, but we also need to launch and make some near-term decisions as well. So with that,
All right. Anything else? Barbara Stebbins, Jessica Tover.
So I just like to remind everyone that there is a local development business plan in the process that the Alameda County Board of Supervisors, in their wisdom, saw that local development is where this program can really offer the most community benefits. As long as you continue to procure power on the market, whether it's the cheapest power you can buy or the greenest power you can buy, you will be failing to provide the most benefits that you could from this program unless you do prioritize the local development of renewable energy projects. That's why we have a local development business plan, and this discussion is pretty disturbing because there's very little mention of the fact that one of the deliverables of the local development business plan are scenarios on how prioritizing, incentivizing local development in a variety of very creative and interesting ways that they've already put out. And hopefully you've all read their work products that they've put out so far, because they have a lot of very creative ideas. So they are supposed to produce scenarios on how those incentive programs, those local development programs, will in fact affect the rates. So it would be very important that you wait to see some of those before you make rate decisions. Otherwise, you will have relegated the local development business plan to a kind of charitable donation. And the community will not be happy with that. And it runs counter to what is in the JPA and the goals that we have set for this program. And as for rates, I challenge you all to go look at a bill from PCE or Sonoma Clean Power. Find where the community choice generation, where that item is in the utility bill. Because $7 to $12 a year doesn't compare with good jobs, with increased business activity, with stable, long-term stable, more stable rates, and a more sustainable community. So I urge you to think about all of that.
Thank you. Jessica.
My comments were around the early procurement, and I did send a letter on behalf of East Bay Clean Power Alliance.
We haven't gotten, that's the next item.
Okay, maybe the number on my card is wrong.
We're still on item 15, I believe?
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
which is the rate options. Are you here to talk about the RFP?
16. I believe my card said 16.
Yeah, that's next.
That's next.
It was a mistake.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, any more comments, Nick? Anything more?
No. I can move through 16 quickly, Jessica. So we'll be there in a moment.
Okay, so we're going to move on to the next item.
Okay, so item 16. At the last meeting, we discussed pursuing a procurement of local renewable energy, so in Alameda County, through a competitive solicitation process. That's sort of the more standard approach to procuring renewables, a request for offers where you go out, you take bids from suppliers, you rank those bids based on cost, based on viability of the project, and you select one or more projects based on some key parameters. So we've developed an RFO set of documents, including a term sheet, a set of documents that we'd want suppliers to fill in if they wanted to bid, and we suggest a process for moving forward with a local Alameda County procurement. This is an update item because we have not yet actually set our policies for when and how the board will sort of opine on procurement process. Certainly any contract that we would sign related to this, we would want to bring back to the board for approval. But given sort of the fact that we're in January now, if we want to see a project, especially a larger scale project, come online in 2018, we do need to move fairly quickly. Our recommendation is to issue an RFO to see where, for larger scale projects, so 2 megawatts to 20 megawatts, or potentially even larger than that, where prices are, and see whether, if we think about our overall energy supply mix, can we fit one or more of those projects into our cost structure without having a significant impact on cost. So these documents that are attached here are the documents that we would release for bidders to fill in and submit back to us. One thing that you'll note is, we have put in very strong labor requirements related to stable and skilled workforce and local workforce development, opportunities for disadvantaged workers, and local union jobs. So we really made sure we put language in there very focused on only wanting to work with suppliers that sort of can check these really critical workforce boxes, and obviously being in Alameda County and able to deliver in the 2018, potentially 2019 timeframe. So, last meeting there was not much feedback on the process. Any feedback? I know Jessica had a comment on this, but any feedback on sort of your views on whether or not we should pursue a request for offers for local renewables within the parameters that we set here would be helpful. If you think that, no, let's not do that, certainly we can wait. But, we think there may be some opportunities for some larger scale projects again that may be fairly aggressively priced to sort of show that win for a wind or solar project in the county this year.
Okay, any questions so far? Okay, let's go. Yeah, Jesse.
Well, I guess Jessica's going to make public comment, but did you receive the letter from the East Bay Clean Power Alliance?
I did.
And could you maybe comment on?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, it's the points that are made there are relevant. The local development business plan is looking at, factors for evaluating these projects, making sure, trying to encourage projects to be sited in specific communities where there's going to be more benefit, innovative ownership models, and it certainly could have some applicability here. I think that process, the plan is under development. We're working towards an April sort of finalization of the plan, The current documents that we've seen in the plan are not specifically applicable to larger scale, other than the workforce development section, are not applicable to large scale renewable development. There may be sections that are coming. There is a section that was issued around integrated resource planning. They've been more focused on smaller scale, feed-in tariff projects that are cited, net metering projects. This is really focused on larger scale. We did draw from the workforce development proposal, and some of the language in here was developed with the assistance of Bethany Jones, who's the author of the workforce development chapter or draft chapter for the local development business plan. So we have endeavored to take the work products that have been produced that are just specifically applicable to sort of this scale of procurement, but waiting until April to take that. These things invariably take time then to sort of translate into documents. Will likely mean for projects of this scale, we won't see anything built in 2018 or early 2019. This is I would view as a really nice to have project. I think it would create local jobs, or one of these projects would create local jobs. It would show that you can do local development at scale. But we can wait. We have lots of other things that we can be focused on as well over the coming months. So I think it's a prioritization question to some degree, and it's not in any shape or form meant to undercut the local development business plan. It's really to say there's some work product there that is directly applicable. Let's leverage that and take this step.
Jessica?
The speakers first.
Well, Jessica's not a speaker. Barbara Stebbins.
I wrote the wrong number down, but she's supposed to speak.
Jessica, do you want to speak on this?
Yes.
Okay, I don't have a card from you. Barbara, Jessica, and Rick Sherman.
Thank you. Sorry, I was supposed to put item 15. I put 16 because it's a board item 15 of item 16. It's confusing. Okay. So we did submit, East Bay Clean Power Alliance did submit a letter asking that this early procurement be included in the local development business plan for the reasons of actually maximizing community benefits. That was the whole point of the local development business plan. And so one of the things is we would like that the procurement proposal to be done in coordination with the plan and include the kinds of community benefit adders as bid point bonuses or bid price adders in the request for proposals. And one thing to make clear in the current RFP is that it's not requiring union, but it alludes to like preference for union. So just to be clear on the language, I wanted to highlight that. So it is very important. I mean, going back to, we spent $500,000. We were supposed to have a local development business plan in October, and to be piecemealing this makes no sense. The whole point was to plan collectively over time, and it just only makes sense in order to have a thoughtful rollout process is to include this RFP within the local development business plan. Thank you.
So, local procurement, local renewable procurement, do we want that? Yes, we want that. We think that's really great, but we don't really understand why it isn't actually part of the local development business plan. What is the point of the local development business plan if there will be procurement of local renewables that isn't factored into that plan? So, I think there at least needs to be communication between the East Bay Community Energy staff and the people working on the local development business plan so that those things can be included. I also just wanted to point out the fact that in the RFP, the preferences that are being proposed for competitive procurement, there are adders, bonus point adders for union hire, for local, and for for various classifications of ownership. So I don't understand why this RFP doesn't include those adders.
So
did you want to answer that?
I just want to answer it. So we did actually, on the sort of the union labor requirement, I did make some inquiries, and the feedback, the reason why it's stated as a preference, not a requirement, is there are some legal limits around requiring a because we're not building the facility ourselves. We're working with a developer, and there are some legal limitations around requiring a developer. That is why it's stated as a preference. That was the legal feedback that we got from Bettany Jones, who's the consultant who drafted the workforce development chapter in the local development business plan. So that was the reason why it was stated as such.
Mr. Chairman.
You turned it off. You turned it off. I know the button is confusing.
Thanks, Al. Good evening to the board, members of the community here. I am Rick Sherman representing Optera Energy. Our parent company is ENGIE, an organization that you may not have heard of. However, it's the third largest energy producer and developer on a worldwide platform with annual revenues of $80 billion. I bring that up because our national headquarters is in downtown Oakland, and we serve the public sector clients throughout the nation and specifically in California, and have been doing so for the better part of 40 years. And we have constructed a number of projects, efficiency and energy related, for the cities that are seated here this evening. I wanted to make a couple of comments as they pertain to the RFO, and specifically there's a statement in here which says to provide the greatest value for EBCE, and our definition of value is similar to what's been stated here in terms of a priority: price, clean, and community. What I would encourage in terms of an evaluation of programs is that community, and this is what we have found, the community aspects of these programs end up being the most impactful. So as was mentioned earlier, you need short-term wins because you have to capture the customers, and the best way to do that is with programs that incorporate very specific aspects of value, and that would be programs that communicate and inform the community. They may very well have an impact on youth and be tied directly to the the next generation of sustainability leaders in terms of developing curriculum that melds a program like this into the schools. So I would encourage and strongly ask that consideration be given for not waiting for this RFO, despite the fact that it may in fact be more expensive than a larger scale development. Thank you.
Thank you. Dan?
Thank you. So, I think, Nick, I think we should move forward in what way we can, the way you're suggesting, or whatever is in this, our local development business plan, which, is that plan actually finished?
No, it's still in the process.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought. So, all right. Because we're going to be procuring a heck of a lot of electricity, and I assume it's mostly going to be long-term contracts, right? Or we don't know.
I think, in time, as we think about the first couple of years of operations, it will be quite a bit of short-term contracting as we think about how long things take to build, as we play out some of the market uncertainty.
Well, okay, so that I appreciate that, because what I want to make sure is that if we have lots of long-term contracts, as most of our portfolio is long-term contracts overwhelmingly, then we'll be squeezing out the local development that may be hard to do in the first year or two, but maybe must be done, year 3, 4, 5, and 10. But if we have too many long-term contracts, they'll be squeezed out. And so we want to make sure we have that combination of short and long-term contracts, so there's room for growing, robust local development that is not going to happen a lot right away, but needs to happen a lot as years go on, and we need to have that room for that. Does that make sense?
Yep, absolutely.
Al?
So I would imagine that over the next 10 years, we're going to have, I'll make up a number, let's say 100 different projects that are complying with the spirit of the long-term, the local development business plan, right? And as I see the question before us at the moment, it's do we want to do the first one soon, right? Even before the long-term, the local development business plan is done. It's just going to be one of the 100, but it means that if we get started on one now, if we put out an RFO and somebody, knocks our socks off, we don't have to accept one. If we get a bunch of mediocre responses, we could just reject them all, right? Yep. But if somebody comes back, after, in April and knocks our socks off, or March, whenever it is, then we can break ground on a project potentially in this year. And if we wait for the local development business plan to be done, that pushes even the earliest break ground date into 2019. And I don't, why not? See if we can get one going, one of the 100 or so projects we're going to do in the next decade. Why not see if we can get one going this year? And as you pointed out, they're likely to be small, so it's not going to tie up a huge amount of dollars, right? It's not going to crowd out other potential projects that might come along and be even better fits once we have the local development business plan completed and all the, the categories of things we're looking for. It's not going to crowd those out. It's just going to allow us to do one project early. So yeah, I would love that. I'd love to see us put an RFO out now and see if somebody really excites us with an offer.
Director Martinez.
Excuse me, Nick, could you confirm that if we delay this request for proposals to the time that we would have the local development business plan in place, that break ground wouldn't happen till 2019?
So that's impossible to confirm because we don't have any bids. I think typically when you think about larger scale projects, they are, they take 6, 12, 18 months to build. So,
and will you remind us of the current timeline for the local development business plan? Is it April?
April.
And what I'm looking at now is a draft for an RFP with a response deadline of March. Can we not wait a month for the responses?
We absolutely can wait. What I would say is we risk, I think, for especially some of the larger scale projects. So there are projects that we know about located, these are in the 10 and 20 megawatt project size. There are projects that we know about that a delay of 3-4 months may mean those projects are not there. So we certainly can wait. This is not, this has no sort of direct link to launch. And I think about prioritization, there's launch, and then there's everything else that's really important, but we have to do everything we need to do to get to launch. So it certainly can. I would say that we may be missing an opportunity, but it's not the kind of opportunity that would be sort of would have a drastic impact on EBC.
Thank you.
Director Elder?
What I heard is different than what's being stated, so I guess I'd like to ask for clarification. East Bay Clean Power Alliance is not asking that we don't procure local renewable energy, right? Okay. So the thing that I heard is that they would like the local development business plan team to be consulted or in conversation or something in the process. And I actually heard Nick saying that Bethany was part of that, and so maybe, and this is something that we'll vote on the 7th, but but I just wanted to clarify, because what I was actually hearing was them requesting that the local development business plan team is part of this process too. And they're nodding. Okay.
So I would say that the local development business plans, it's a large team. The consultants that have the most relevant experience are people we have been talking to. The team, as currently constructed, does not have wholesale procurement experts. They have people who are focused on feed-in tariff design. They have folks who are focused on energy efficiency. There's a lot of modeling, but when we really think about constructing an RFO, the most relevant experience on the team is the workforce development lead, Bethany Jones. She has been consulted very purposefully, right? We wanted her feedback because we knew that was a section that was there. We could actually start to weave those recommendations into the RFO.
I wasn't advocating, I was clarifying that I was hearing a different thing. I don't know.
Anybody else? All right, well, where do we go from here? Because...
So what I think I'm hearing is some back and forth, but I guess what my recommendation is, our plan is, unless I hear affirmatively not to, that we are going to issue the RFO and see what we get. And if that's something that the board does not want us to do, we do not have to do it. But I think that it's an opportunity to, if nothing else, to do some price discovery and see if there are some good opportunities. If there are not, we don't have to pursue these contracts. We can wait.
I personally am okay with that. I'm really, we got to do something, and so I'm ready to see that happen. So I think Al has correctly stated this is like 1 of 100, and I'm willing to see what the market looks like. So.
Okay.
I support that as well.
Director Thomas, okay. So I think you're getting the direction of the board.
Okay. Great.
Right, can I quickly get a motion on item 19, the item to set up the executive committee? I need a motion. I'm getting stuck somewhere. I'm just jumping ahead to item 19.
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Is there any objection to it? Motion passed without objection. Thank you. Sorry, I just had to see something get done.
So,
move to item 17.
We have two items left. What I would say is I would like to have our presentation on our 100% renewable product and our third product, and I think there's a last presentation on our energy, the master service agreements. I think we can skip that one. We are going to be bringing these EEIs back for approval, but it could be a brief time savings if that is the will of the body.
To do what?
We can.
He's saying we can skip 18.
We can skip 18.
How long is 18 going to take?
Well, 5 minutes if that's okay.
Well, that's not worth skipping. Okay, go ahead. I mean, somebody's obviously been sitting here till 9:25 to do their presentation on it, so now I'm going to say go home when their presentation is only 5 minutes.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so as I understand it...
No, mine's not 5 minutes. Mine's 35.
Huh?
No, it's not.
So we're being funny at 9:25.
Yeah.
All right.
A little punchy.
Item 17.
All right. Good evening, Board. I'm Annie Henderson, Vice President of Marketing and Account Services
Oh, no
with
wonder
EBCE.
you're a marketing person.
Haha.
Haha.
So most of tonight we've been talking about our default product, which in marketing we call Bright Choice. So we've been talking about the power mix and the potential rate setting, but what I wanted to talk about is our second option, our premier premium option, Brilliant 100. So up to this point, the 100 has not been clearly defined. I wanted to present some options about how we could define this. So what we're looking at is 100% renewable energy. It's just dependent on which region are we buying that energy from. Is it from the WEC region that Supriya spoke to earlier, or is it only from within California? The premium over a PG&E rate, and in this case, I just did a quick analysis and modeled it off of an E1 PG&E rate, which is your standard residential non-time of use rate, is dependent on what discount we offer for the Bright Choice product from PG&E, and then what premium we add per kilowatt hour for this Brilliant 100 product. And in this slide, I just wanted to compare two existing CCAs and the premium product that they offer. The MCE Deep Green product, which is biomass PV and wind, it's about a 10% premium off of the standard PG&E rate. And then for Sonoma Clean Power, theirs is 100% geothermal, and they have a premium of about 23%. So let's look at what it might be for EBCE. And again, this is all somewhat speculative in terms of what premium we would actually add for each product. This is just meant to be illustrative. So across the top in the green here, we have representative discount rates. What Nick presented earlier was maybe 2 to 3%. What he noted is that existing CCAs are anywhere from even lower than 1% up to 5%. And then in the blue column, we see the potential premium add-ons per kilowatt hour. And just for comparison, I've added this bottom chart here. So it goes as high as 2.5 cents per kilowatt hour to add for this premium product. It can go as low as under a penny. So depending on what the board decides we want to do for a discount and for a premium, we could see a potential WEC product, meaning that it's the larger renewables region, a little bit cheaper. That could be anywhere from a 10 to 15% premium over PG&E. With an all-California product, let's assume we have to add 2.5 cents premium because of the additional cost. It could be 20 to 25% premium. But all of this is illustrative. We have not done the specific modeling. I just wanted to indicate which option we decide on regions and what premium and discount will impact or will influence the impact to a customer and what they pay on their bill. So quickly, next to the third potential product. So as Councilmember Kalb mentioned, we've been talking about this without really putting any stake in the ground about what a third product might look like. Here are some potential options. At launch, we could focus in on our two options, Bright Choice and Brilliant 100, as a default and then a premium product, reserving the option to offer a third product at a future date. We could develop some customized solutions for large customers. Since our phase one is commercial, industrial, and municipal, we've already had some of these conversations. Things like a 100% Green E certified product is something that our commercial customers are interested in. It helps them either obtain or maintain their LEED certification for LEED Gold buildings or platinum buildings. So that is, we could do some sort of customized approach on a case-by-case basis for these larger customers that we will soon be serving. A third option that I like to call build local, building on the Bright Choice and Brilliant 100, is it would be the same power mix as a Bright Choice, but we would add that premium to the cost paid by the consumer, and that premium would then be deposited into the local development fund, contribute to that, what Nick showed earlier, the 10% of our net revenue that would be allocated for local development projects. And then lastly, something that's probably longer horizon, maybe late 2018, 2019, would be a community or shared solar product, something maybe similar to what MCE offers. And just to give you the context, I highlighted here 2 third products offered by other CCAs. Not all CCAs have a third product. It is somewhat unique. So in the MCE territory, this only came in after their launch, but they, of course, have their local soul product. It is quite limited because of the size of the project. It only has so much capacity. There is a pretty steep premium. It's over 30% for that. 30% over what they charge for deep green, so that's like 33 to 40% higher than PG&E. And then we have Monterey Bay is coming out of the gates with a third product. Monterey Bay is taking a very different approach. They are offering no discount to their consumers. They are just matching the rates of PG&E, but then on an annual basis, they offer a 3% rebate. So their default product is, I'm going to send you a check for 3% of the energy costs that you had for that year. Their second product, you can choose to essentially donate that rebate to the Monterey Bay Community Power. And then their third option is you can choose to donate that to a local environmental organization. So kind of similar to what I had initially proposed with Build Local, where the consumer is saying, I'm willing to pay a premium so that the money goes back to my community. That one, is just the same cost to the consumer as PG&E, but with maybe a smaller amount of money being diverted into the local projects. So this is just here for your consideration. We look forward to having an ongoing conversation with you about what our Brilliant 100 product should look like, what the premium should be above the Bright Choice. Of course, the discount is part of earlier consideration. And then for the third product, we look forward to hearing your thoughts, both from the board and the community, about what should be offered either at launch or in the near future.
I just want to make one sort of additional point there, and it has to do with some of the conversations we're having with staff in our member jurisdictions about 100%, the 100% product, and defaulting, sort of requiring all customers to default onto 100%, meeting climate goals. What is the role of the 100% product? So what I think we really want to highlight here is, one, we're going out in the market and pricing this product. It is a premium product. That's sort of those are the market realities. If we wanted to offer it at a lower cost, we would have to, non-participating customers would have to subsidize it. Two, there's some flexibility in how we roll out 100%. So the point around marketing, I think we really want to think about how do we market this product, more effectively. We also have the ability to say, if a community wants to go to 100% in the future, that's certainly a consideration. We have the ability to set rates. So if in a year or two there's a priority, we as a community want to evaluate 100%, we want to think about the most cost-effective way to get there, we will work with you to get there. I don't think that the 100% products that have typically been offered are necessarily the most cost-effective. Tom mentioned that there are very attractive wind and solar prices, but that requires you buying a new facility, entering into a long-term contract. But there's some really creative ways that we can allow a community to say, you want to get really cost-effective renewable energy, how about we work with you to have your customers agree to a exit fee. So we're going to build a solar plant just for the people of your particular city, and you have to stick with us for some period because we're building something that we wouldn't have otherwise built on behalf of your customers. That's the promise of CCAs, is that flexibility, that optionality, that sort of ability to tailor our services. And that's really the discussion that we want to start having with our cities and with our members, is how do we meet your goals of 100% renewable energy? Because I know so many of you have them.
Director Martinez. And Director Powell.
So this is not a comment on this particular presentation, but I was wondering if I could make a request of staff, if the board agrees, that when we talk about, and can you go back a couple of slides, when we're talking about the impact of kilowatt hour prices on ratepayers, if we can stick to either percentages, or if you could provide us with case studies for a care customer, a low-income customer, an average residential customer, a small business, large business. What I need to be able to communicate to the people who live in my city is, how is this going to impact your bill? So when we're talking about this, when we go back and forth between kilowatt hour and percentages, it's more digestible for me as someone who has to communicate this information if we stick to either percentages, or if you can provide those case studies so I can say the average person in Emeryville is going to experience this difference if they choose to go to the 100% renewable route. And I want to be an advocate for these programs, and I think we could do a lot of upselling in my community, but I want to be prepared to answer those questions about how this is going to impact folks' bills.
Absolutely.
Director Call.
Thank you. So earlier in your presentation, you asked options in terms of WEC-wide versus California only. Now, as someone pointed out earlier, we put into our JP agreement that in terms of the RPS, our bucket 3 can be no more than half of what the PG&E is allowed to do, right? It's, instead of 10%, it's 5%, for example, right? Mm-hmm. So I would want us to carry that same philosophy throughout whatever entire procurement we're doing, whether it's RPS or the rest of it. And so that's my comment on your question. So that would still allow a little bit beyond California, but not more than what would be a carryover, what would be analogous to the 5% cap of bucket 3.
So these numbers reflect no bucket 3.
Oh, I see. So WEC-wide is still no bucket 3.
It has to be, as long as it's with the energy.
Right.
So these are WEC-wide. It still counts as bucket 1 or 2, no bucket 3. This is a no bucket 3 scenario.
Okay. Appreciate that. Then forget my words.
Director Eldred?
Mine is just a clarification on a term. You were talking about green energy, and since I haven't heard of that before, I just Googled it, and it just looks like it's certified RECs, but what bucket do those RECs come from?
I'm going to defer to Supriya, or maybe Dan, who used to run the Greenie certification program for many years.
There's no bucket requirement.
Can you come up to the mic?
You got to come up to the mic. Introduce yourself.
Hi, Dan Lieberman, brand new to PCE, my second week. Greenie doesn't have a specific bucket requirement, so the product that's being described here, these options, could all be Greenie certified. They have additional requirements related to disclosure. So Greenie's customer disclosure requirements are more robust than the state rules, and also the newness of the renewables is more strict than California's RPS definition. For example, the facility has to have been put online within the last 15 years to be Greenie eligible. So there's some differences there that do impact price. So those are, EBCE may wish to have this second option Greenie certified, or maybe a third option based on the price impacts of those Greenie constraints.
I do see how, like if we have businesses, especially large businesses who want to maintain their LEED certification, that looking at that thing, but if there's no bucket requirements, could it be bucket 3?
Greenie would allow it to be bucket 3. You just have to have additional disclosure saying it's bucket 3.
So
basically.
We could prohibit it.
What's that?
So it could be bucket 3.
Greenie would allow that as long as you disclosed that.
Okay.
Yes.
And if it had to be put on the market within the last 15 years, it does, so it's not putting any new green on the market. All right, I'll look at that more. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Any further questions?
I don't see any.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
We have one last presentation here on standard power purchase agreements and confirms. Again, this item we are going to be bringing back not only this item, but probably between 6 and 8 actual energy EEI master service agreements to allow us to start buying energy. So, Supriya, would you?
Oh, you're right. I'm sorry.
Tell us, speakers.
Barbara left.
Oh,
Audrey Ishinosi? She did? I hope I said her name right. Tom Kelly.
Thank you. Tom Kelly, Berkeley. You know, I've mentioned before that my colleague Ben Foster and I have been looking at this 100% renewable default product financed by the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. And we've been looking at this 100% renewable from other programs very closely. I mean, from every angle possible to try and figure out how it's done. And basically the conclusions we've come to is that, number one, there is no relationship between the price of a penny, let's say, from MCE and its actual cost. And the reason for that, we feel, is that there are so few customers that are actually opting up to the 100% product that they're basically just serving that customer load with the power that they're procuring for everybody. So it's more of a marketing effort. MCE takes half of that penny, puts it into a fund, and uses it for local development. So the relationship between the actual cost of the power and what's being charged the customer isn't clear. And it's interesting. I mean, you look at Silicon Valley, their 100% product is 0.8 of a cent per kilowatt hour, which for an average customer would be about $3 or $4 a month. So the other thing I wanted to say about that is that the reason, well, the reason that people don't opt up, and the average is about 2 to 3% in all the programs. Marin Clean Energy is bumped up a little bit because now most of their cities are getting 100% power for their municipal accounts. But the reason people don't opt up is because it's like inertia. And I mean, just think of it in your own lives. I mean, you want to change something, think about how hard sometimes that is to do. People are well-intentioned, they want to do it, but they never get around to it. The programs themselves generally don't spend a lot of time and effort trying to encourage people to opt up because they know they have to invest a lot of time and energy in trying to convince people one-on-one to opt up. There's been some success with companies like Salesforce and Facebook who have these obligations to, or they've stated obligations due to 100% clean power, and I think there's some opportunities there. But by and large, getting people to the 100% is not something that people themselves do. It's something that the program has to do for them. And you'll see the evolution of the renewable content in programs inching up slowly over time because it's basically the programs that are doing that. So anyway, back to our study. We're hoping to conclude this pretty soon, come around and talk to some of the cities that are participating and see what you think. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Hal.
So first, I wanted to echo what Director Martinez was saying about the way that the information is presented. That would be very helpful and is a great suggestion, so thank you. And then what Mr. Kelly just said really resonates with me as well. Personally, I don't know that there's a lot of value in spending a lot of time coming up with 2 and 3 and 4 different options because 95+% of the folks are going to be on the baseline option, and maybe our efforts would be, as you indicated, sort of better invested just focusing on making that as good as it can possibly be, in year 1 and in the out years. And so that sounds logical to me. And so I guess I would encourage us to not go too hog wild with lots of different rates and the complexity and the marketing cost that's going to incur for very little benefit, potentially. So if there are numbers from some of the other
jurisdictions that show that it's, 10, 15, 20% of people opting up, then I will withdraw that remarks. But I haven't seen those numbers yet, so.
Okay. So we're moving to item 18.
So this is item 18, Mr. Priya, please. As I was just saying, we will be bringing, I think, was it 7 master service?
That's the goal. But
7 master service agreements forward. They're all effectively the same document. There's some details that are going to be different, but we're going to be bringing 7 of these forward at the next meeting. The idea being these are the contracts. These are the tools that you use once you have set your power content guidelines and your rate discount. This is what you go and then buy energy. You use these contracts as the basis to go out and actually contract for energy supply to meet customer demands, particularly sort of in the short term.
Sure, and really the bottom line here is that we want to adopt industry best practices when entering into our short and medium transactions, and there's 2 ways to do that, and many different load serving entities in California do that. There's the Edison Electric Institute agreement, which places very tight bounds on credit requirements, and then for shorter term transactions we're going to use the Western System Power Pool Agreement, or what we call the WSPP, because we are WSPP members. And to mitigate our credit risk, we're going to be using a very kind of widely used CCA structure called a lockbox, in which we can use cash collateralized amount over several different suppliers, again, to mitigate our credit needs from our credit facility and just lower our overall costs of operation. And that's a diagram of how a lockbox structure works, the cash flow between PG&E, SMUD, our customers, ourselves, and then to our suppliers of short and medium term energy. Any questions? We've actually put in the board package all these different documents and agreements for your review. Thank you.
Is that just a smirk?
That's it? Just a smirk, sorry.
All right. Anybody else down there? Thank God. Anything to add, Nick, to this?
Nope.
Good. All right. Board member and staff announcements. Yes, Director Martinez.
So on page 17 of our
17?
Agenda, yes.
I'm on
We've got, I know where we
right?
passed this, but we've got 2 new additions to our staff, and I know we just heard from Dan Lieberman, but is our VP of Technology and Analysis still in the room? Would you please step up will you please step to the microphone? And will you please confirm that today is your birthday?
That is correct.
Okay.
Your honor.
Then a happy birthday to you.
Thank you
for staying this long. And if the chair would allow, if you could give a brief introduction of yourself, just so we all know who you are.
Yeah. Absolutely. My name is Tajait Lausin. I'm the VP of Technology and Analytics. I've been involved so far with our interaction with our data management services provider. And I come from a background of, I've actually never worked on the energy side specifically for either a utility or an energy company, but I've worked my entire career, over 20 years now, working to promote energy efficiency and energy management software technologies. Most recently, I was with Oracle doing energy analytics applications for electric, water, and gas utilities to help them better extract value out of their advanced metering infrastructure. And that's all I'll delay you with tonight. But thank you very much. Honored to be here.
Happy birthday.
Welcome. Anybody else? Yes, Dr. Albert.
We also have a baby that was just born to one of our staff. Howard, our COO, just had a baby named Hunter, and that's very exciting. And so I'm glad he's not here. And then I want to give a shout out to the community who, in their panic when they received the agenda, actually thought we were going to be voting on all of these things and showed up at last night's meeting having parsed them out and read every single bit of it and formed at least something of a recommendation. So that was kind of off the hook. But because these things, like this thing that we just sent this whole agenda on, are really, really dense, meaty items that involve a lot of topic experts, I am going to invite all of you or your alternates to come. We scheduled 2 meetings between now and the next time this board meets. Monday, the 22nd at 7 p.m. here, and I believe, and February 5th, which is our regularly scheduled meeting, also at 7 p.m., I believe. And anybody here, whether or not you can make it to the meetings, you are still welcome to submit your comments, to email them to Stephanie so she can distribute them to us. It's really, really important, especially on these topic dense things, that people give feedback and show up whether or not you can make that particular meeting time. And if any of you are interested in specific items, this is when we get heavy into it and actually debate all the things inside of it. So you are welcome and encouraged to come as we really dig into these things.
Okay. Yes, Stephanie.
I would just like to note that the February 7th meeting will be held at the Castro Valley Library due to a scheduling conflict.
You're doing my job now. I was going to do that, but thank you. Thank you. That's a good employee. I appreciate that.
Check out books at the same time?
Only if you return them. I would like to thank everybody for being here, especially Mayor Dutra-Vinacci. I can assure you they don't always go this long.
Usually midnight.
Thank you all very much. We are adjourned.
That was pretty good. I'm shocked.
It was a long agenda.
That we're done this early.
Because we kind of got